מקדשנו, בגילו ושמחה ממלאים את ליבנו, לילה ויום סביבוננו יסוד, סופגניות נאכל בם לרוב. הדליקו נרות חנוכה רבים, על הניסים ועל הנפלאות אשר עשה השם למכבים, על הניסים ועל הנפלאות אשר עשה השם למכבים. הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, על הניסים ועל הנפלאות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו, שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. יוונים יוונים נקבצו עליי, אזי בימי חשמנים, ופרצו חומות מגדלי ודימו כל השמנים, ומינות ארכנקנים נעשה נס לשושנים, בני בינה ימי שמונה קבו שיעור עננים, בני בינה ימי שמונה קבו שיעור עננים. יוונים יוונים נקבצו עליי, אזי בימי חשמנים, ופרצו חומות חומות מגדלי ודימו כל השמנים. יוונים יוונים נקבצו עליי, אזי בימי חשמנים, ופרצו חומות חומות מגדלי ודימו כל השמנים, ומינות ארכנקנים נעשה נס לשושנים, בני בינה ימי שמונה קבו שיעור עננים, בני בינה ימי שמונה קבו שיעור עננים. כת קטן, כת קטן, 8 ימים שם נולדן, כל העם התפלא מאליו ומתמלא, כל העם אז התכנס והכריז אך זהו נס, אילו לקצה נשאר מקדשנו לא רוח. כת קטן, כת קטן, 8 ימים שם נולדן. נר לי דקי, בחנוכה נרי ידליק, בחנוכה נרי יאיר, בחנוכה שירי השיר. חנוכיה לי יש, צוחקת באש, וסחה לי בלג על כת קטן אחד, וסחה לי בלג על כת קטן אחד. חנוכיה שלי, אורך נעלי, עמד בצד הפח, הפח עם שמן זך, הדליקו בו האור לשיר ולמזמור, הדליקו בו האור לשיר ולמזמור. חנוכיה שלי, אורך נעלי. סביבון סוף סוף סוף, חנוכה הוא חג טוב, חנוכה הוא חג טוב, סביבון סוף סוף סוף, סוף נסוף כה וכה, נס גדול היה פה, נס גדול היה פה, סוף נסוף כה וכה, הנה אתם, לכבוד מה יודעים אתם, לכבוד מה, לכבוד החנוכה. יודעים אתם, לכבוד מה יודעים אתם, לכבוד מה יודעים אתם, לכבוד מה, לכבוד החנוכה. חנוכה, חנוכה, חג יפה כל כך, או חביב מסביב גילי ילד רך. חנוכה, חנוכה, סביבון סוף סוף, סוף נסוף, סוף נסוף, מה נעים וטוב. באנו חושך לגרש, בידינו אור ואש, כל אחד הוא אור קטן, וכולנו אור איתן. סעו החושך על השחור, סעו מפני האור, סעו החושך על השחור, סעו מפני האור. מעוז צור ישועתי, לך נאה לשבח, תיכון בית תפילתי, ושם תודה נזבח. לעת תכין מטבע, מצערם נבח. אז אגמור בשיר מזמור, חנוכת המזבח. אז אגמור בשיר מזמור, חנוכת המזבח. דשנו בגילו ושמחה ממלאים את ליבנו, לילה ויום סביב עוננו יסוד, סוף גניות נאכל במלאכות. העידו, הדליקו, נרות חנוכה רבים, על הניסים ועל הנפלאות אשר עשה השם למכבים. על הניסים ועל הנפלאות אשר עשה השם למכבים. הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, על הניסים ועל הנפלאות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו, שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל התבואות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו.
Shalom, everybody, and Hanukkah Sameach. Happy Hanukkah. We have decided to do an impromptu Hanukkah study. We're going to be studying the first book of Maccabees. It should be very interesting. And it should be very interesting for the simple reason that most people have never read through it. It can be a little bit grueling at times, but with our study, we're going to make it hopefully non-grueling, but it really goes into great, I would say, excruciating detail about the events of Hanukkah. And we'll find out a couple of interesting things. I doubt we'll get through the whole book, but we'll get through enough to be able to make some of the important points. And that is, number one, the oil miracle, the reason that the rabbis light their Hanukkah, the nine-pronged menorah. That oil miracle never happened. It was completely made up by the rabbis. We're going to talk about why the rabbis made up this miracle. We're going to understand that they hated the Maccabees, or more specifically, they hated the Hasmoneans, and we'll talk about why. And they did a number of things to destroy and then later downplay the role of the Hasmoneans in Jewish history. We can now talk about Jewish history because we're no longer talking about the period of Israelite history, right? The Israelites, the Israeli Empire or the Israelite Empire, both the North and the South, have already been exiled. We are now in a period where, yes, the Judean exiles, some of them have returned to Judea, to the southern kingdom. But this is now much later. Judea is no longer an independent state. It has been taken over by the Greeks in, don't quote me on it, but approximately 330 BCE with the conquests of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great died at the age of about 32 years old, if my memory serves me correctly, and his kingdom was split up among his generals. The general that took over the land of Israel was named Seleucus, and now we're talking about a period during the Hanukkah period where Israel is ruled by the kingdom that was set up, or the progenitor of which was Alexander, but then Seleucus. So it's called the Seleucid Greek kingdom. And the Hanukkah story takes place in 165 BCE. So if Alexander operated around 330 BCE, give or take, then 165 BCE, we're talking about, 65, about 165 years after Alexander the Great. Again, these are all rough numbers. I don't have the numbers in front of me. We can look them up if we want to. So that's what we're talking about. That's what we're going to be learning. We're going to be learning through the Book of Maccabees, and I have here my very good friend and up-and-coming Karaite, hopefully someday Hakham, but very knowledgeable and thorough and gung-ho and dedicated Karaite, Yehuda. So let me bring Yehuda on. Boom, there's Yehuda. Oh, Yehuda, you're looking very good today.
Thank you very much. I did my hair this morning.
Are you gonna stick with that, or you don't have to put your face on, but it would be nice.
Yeah, I'll stick with that for the time.
You got it. Your choice. So there's Yehuda. Okay, he's looking very buff today. Has been working out a lot, and he's growing his hair out. I can see, and has a nice beard going. So yeah, Yehuda, do you have any introductory statements that you would like to say?
Not that I can think. So, regarding myself, I became a Karaite from the rabbinic tradition. I've been a Karaite probably for about maybe 14, 15, 16 months. I discovered Karaitism really through frustration with rabbinic Judaism. You know, my background is in conservative or in the Reform. Trying to become Orthodox in a non-Orthodox area, it proved to be very difficult. And through the frustrations coming from the impracticalities, such as kashrut, or the expense of particular things, for example, I couldn't. I got so stressed and so annoyed at the fact that I found these things, certain things, as I say, such as kashrut, to be impractical. It made me think, it made me question. I would go back to the Torah to see what it would say in its pshat, go back to the Mishnah, go back to Shulchan Aruch. Things didn't make sense. So through investigation, I found Karaitism. It made perfect sense. From that, I found Melech, and ever since I've been a Karaite. So that's it, really. From my perspective, I was not born a Karaite. I don't come from the Karaite tradition, but it's something that I am very proud to say I am associated with.
Very nice. Thank you, Yehuda. So, guys, watch out for this guy, man. He's up and coming. I'm telling you, he's going to be a future Chacham. So, when my time winds down, which it eventually will, this guy is going to be a big shot. Watch out, big shot in a humble way. I'm telling you, he's up and coming. He's dangerous, man. All right. So let's first talk a little bit about what we're going to be learning today. We're going to be learning the Book of Maccabees. So we should learn a little bit about what this Book of Maccabees are. There are 4 books in what's called the Book of Maccabees, not Maccabees. That's an antivirus and a guy who died in Spanish prison. But at any rate, the Book of Maccabees is a bit complex and unexpected. There are 4 books of Maccabees. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about what all 4 books are. But the only ones that are really relevant to us are the first and second Maccabees, because they are historical accounts, firsthand or perhaps secondhand historical accounts of the actual events of Hanukkah. Yehuda, can I ask you, this kind of a fizz coming off the back of your, I don't know what you're using to connect, but
it might be my PC fan. One second.
Yeah, maybe you have, do you have headphones or something like that? Something like that?
Yeah,
I'm going to mute you temporarily. You work out your sound problems and then you let me know and get you right back on. All right. So, so what is the first book of Maccabees? Let's turn to our favorite rabbi. We don't like a lot of rabbis, but my Rebbe is named Rabbi Wikipedia. My second Rebbe is named Rabbi Google. And these are very more knowledgeable than any rabbi I've ever met in my life. So let's turn for a second to Rabbi Wikipedia. I'm going to share the screen. And we can just do the window thing. Let's do that. Boom. There we go. And let's read a little bit. We still got the fizzy, Huda. Yeah, I'll put you back on mute. Just when you're ready, let me know. Okay. Okay. So we're going to learn a little bit about the Book of Maccabees. So here it is, 1 Maccabees. Can you guys all see that? I hope so. Yes. Okay. First Maccabees, also known as the First Book of Maccabees, blah blah blah, is a Deuteronomical book which details the history of the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid Empire. So what does it mean, a Deuteronomical book? Okay, it means it's part of the Apocrypha. Okay, the Apocrypha is a collection of books that did not make it into the canon known as the Tanakh, but basically it's books that kind of cover the period just after the Tanakh until around the 1st century BC, give or take. Okay, as well as the founding and earliest history of the independent Hasmonean kingdom. It describes the promulgation of decrees. We don't need to know what it describes. We're going to see. Describes the events of Hanukkah, basically. Okay, we can skip all this. We can skip all this. Okay, this is what we want to get to. So the author is anonymous, but he probably wrote in the newly independent Hasmonean kingdom after the success of the Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century BC. So when did the events of Hanukkah take place? They took place in 165 BCE, if my memory serves me correctly. I think that's right. So soon after that, the Hasmoneans defeated the Seleucid Greeks, established their own independent kingdom, often called the Second Independent Israeli or Israelite Commonwealth. The state of Israel is often called the third, although there really was a third, which was for a small amount of time after the or during the Bar Kokhba rebellions. Also an independent state of Israel was set up in the land of Israel. But this is usually called the Second Independent Commonwealth of the state of Israel, that was run by the Hasmoneans until the Pharisees, until the Romans came in, again, don't quote me on this, but 63 BCE, I believe, is when the Pharisees basically wanted to destroy the Hasmoneans, which is one of the reasons they made up this false oil miracle. We're going to talk a lot more about this afterwards. But they sent a delegation to Rome in 63 BCE. Again, if my memory serves me correct, I could look it up exactly afterwards. And basically invited the Romans in. They made a deal with the Romans that if they destroy the Hasmonean dynasty, which was associated with the Sadducees, because the Sadducees were associated with the temple or were basically Kohanim. The Hasmoneans were Kohanim because the Maccabees were Kohanim, because the progenitor of the Maccabees was a Kohen. So it all begins to make sense. The Pharisees hated the Sadducees. The Hasmoneans, at least earlier, until some of the Hasmonean kings became also Pharisees, but the earlier Hasmonean kings were basically Sadducees, or basically temple associated, and then later Sadducees. Pharisees hated the Sadducees, therefore the Pharisees hated the Hasmonean dynasty, and the best way to destroy it would be to make a deal with the Romans, ask them to come in and take over the land of Israel, which they did in, again, if my memory serves me correct, in 37 BCE. I might be wrong on those dates. Don't quote me. I don't have the information in front of me. But that's the basic idea, okay? So First Maccabees was probably written in Hebrew originally. However, this original Hebrew has been lost, and the work only survives in translation Koine Greek. Koine Greek is kind of like common Greek. It's maybe the difference between the way they might speak English in the suburbs or in the slums of London versus the way that the Queen might speak English. It's basically was kind of the lingua franca of the Greek-speaking world. Koine Greek, in fact, you can look it up, also known as Hellenistic Greek, blah, 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 was the common super-regional form of Greek spoken and written during the Hellenistic period, the Roman Empire, etc. Okay, contained in the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Jewish scripture. So that's all we have. Although the original might have been in Hebrew. Back here, Rabbi Wikipedia. Although the original might have been in Hebrew, we don't have that version. And the best we have is the Septuagint version, the Greek Septuagint version. So that's what we have. We're not going to be learning it in Greek, because I am not an expert in ancient Greek, although I can get by more or less. But B, there's no reason to, because the Koine Greek, the Septuagint version in Greek is already a translation from the Hebrew. So if we're dealing with a translation, we might as well already go straight to the English. So we're not going to be looking at Hebrew this time. Usually in our Torah studies, we look at the Hebrew directly. There is no direct Hebrew, so we're just going to be learning this in English for the reasons stated. Okay. Let's go on a little bit. Septuagint, blah 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 blah. We don't need any of this. We don't need any of this. That's talking about the Septuagint. Generally prove. Okay, here we go. Rabbinical Judaism generally disapproved of the rule of the Hasmonean dynasty, but the book is openly pro-Hasmonean, as am I, and as should be, in my humble opinion, every Karaite. One of several factors for the lack of enthusiasm for the book within later Judaism. First Maccabees is best known for its account of the recapture of Jerusalem in the year 164 BCE and the rededication of the Second Temple. So rededication, that's where we get the word Hannukah. Hannukah means dedication. We have a number of dedication. We have the dedication of the tabernacle in the end of the book of Exodus. We have the dedication of the first temple by Solomon, which we can talk a little bit about. And now we have this rededication. We have the dedication of the first temple. I'm sorry, of the second temple, spoken about in the book of Ezra, or alluded to in the book of Ezra. And then we have this rededication of the second temple. As we'll see, the second temple had been defiled by the Greeks. They started worshiping to their foreign gods and defiling our temple on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And eventually the Maccabees had enough, gathered an army together, defeated the Seleucid Greeks, chased them out of the land of Israel, and then rededicated the temple. And that's what Hanukkah means. Hanukkah is the same word that's used for the dedication of the tabernacle in the end of the book of Exodus, the dedication of the first temple, and also for Hanukkah. So Hanukkah means dedication. The temple is being rededicated. It's being cleaned out, and then it's being rededicated. It's being inaugurated into its renewed role as a Jewish. Again, we can use the word Jewish at this point, as a Jewish temple. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. Let's see if there's anything else. Let's talk a bit about authorship and date. The author of First Maccabees is anonymous and unknown. He wrote in the post-independence Hasmonean kingdom, probably during the reign of high priest John Hyrcanus. Okay, with a few scholars suggesting that early in the reign of Alexander Jannaeus is also a possibility. So basically, if we're talking about 134 to 104 BCE, or here around 100 BCE, so we're talking about approximately 50 to 100 years after the events of Hanukkah. The Hanukkah events took place in 165, approximately BCE, and he wrote in approximately, anywhere from 134 to 75, so we'll take the average about 100 BCE. So we're talking about 65 years later on average after the events of Hanukkah. So that would be, if we're in the year 2024 minus 60 is going to be 1964. So that would be like an historian today writing a book about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, right? That's the time difference that we're talking about. So we're not talking about a major time difference. There's still a lot of history going around. There's still a lot of knowledge going around about what happened. And there were probably other sources which have been lost, which this author was basing himself on, okay? All agree that the book was written before 63 BC. Okay. Right, okay. As the author shows great admiration towards Rome and does not know of the Roman general Pompey conquering Jerusalem. So there we go. So that's when Pompey came in and conquered Jerusalem. It wasn't 37, as I said before. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now. It was in 63 BCE that the Romans invited in by the Pharisees. In fact, the Pharisees opened the gates of Jerusalem to allow the Romans in. You can imagine that would be like Benjamin Netanyahu opening the gates of Israel to let Hamas in, which I guess he kind of did on October 7th, but he's trying to redeem himself. God bless him. May he be well and prosper. All right. At any rate, that's what we're talking about. This is how evil, how absolutely evil the Pharisees and the rabbis are. This is the sect. This is the cult that has been ruling over the nation of Israel for the past 2,000 plus years. They took the enemies, which became the enemies of Israel, the Romans, in the year 70 CE. They destroyed the Second Temple. They burnt it to the ground. In fact, a couple of months ago, we did a video of me visiting the area, basically where the Western Wall meets the Southern Wall of the what's called the retaining wall, the Herodian retaining wall around the Temple Mount. And you could still see burnt stones thrown down by the Romans in the year 70 CE when they conquered Jerusalem and destroyed, when they broke into Jerusalem and then destroyed the Second Temple. So thank you, Pharisees, for inviting the Romans in, because you hated your own fellow Jews, the Hasmoneans, because they would not accept your ridiculous, stupid, and false, quote-unquote, oral law. At any rate, and reducing the Hasmonean kingdom to a client state of the Roman Republic in that year. He was likely a court historian or equivalent. The author appears to be very familiar with Judea and its geography, but appears less well informed about the wider Hellenistic world. The entire work is generally considered to be a unity composed by a single author on both philological and thematic grounds. Philological means linguistic, okay? Here, philology is the study of language and oral and written historical sources, blah, blah, blah. And thematic grounds, although there are occasional short passages sometimes contested, is potentially being edited at a later date. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about the Tanakh here. If this is a documentary hypothesis for the Book of Maccabees, First Book of Maccabees, so be it. Okay. So let's see if we want to read about this: language and style, contents, structure, synopsis. There's a lot to read here. I think that's enough. Maybe we read one more paragraph. Title, Jude the Maccabee. Okay, let's just read this paragraph and then we'll dig right in. Okay, the title 1 Maccabees is not the original title of the work. Rather that title comes from the Septuagint, which gave it that title to distinguish it from the other books of Maccabees. In the book itself, Maccabees used solely as a personal title for Judah Maccabee, Latinized as Judas Maccabeus. Judah's Maccabee title is generally referred to generally tied to the Aramaic word makaba, makebet in modern Hebrew, hammer or sledgehammer. There you go. What is it? The Hebrew Hammer? Wasn't that a movie or something like that? I didn't watch it. Wasn't it Adam Sandler or something like that? After I saw the Zohan movie, one of the few movies in my life that I thought was so bad that I actually walked out in the middle of it. I mean, it was ridiculously bad. I'm like, I'm not watching any more Adam Sandler movies. Although, didn't he do one about a diamond? I don't know, whatever. Doesn't matter. Anyway, it is unknown how he got this epithet. Most presume it was in recognition of his prowess in battle. The word Maccabees, in plural, however, does not appear to have been used until centuries after the Maccabean revolt. At first, it was used to describe the martyrs described in the second Maccabees. It later became a title given to the rebels as, okay, we're getting too much into it. Maybe we'll go back. We'll take breaks from actually learning the Book of Maccabees. We can go back here and check back with Rabbi Wikipedia and get some more information. Okay, let's see if Daniel has solved his... No, he hasn't. Yehuda. What's going on there, man? Antiochus Epiphany the Fourth sucks. Hey, couldn't have said it any better.
Hello?
Yes, Yehuda. What's going on with the sound
Oh,
situation there? All right. Oh my. Like I said, up and coming Hakham. To be a Hakham, the first thing you have to do is be a sound engineer. Unfortunately, I found that out the hard way. Believe me, every Shabbat I find that out. All right. What?
Is it still there?
I can barely hear you, and I hear sizzling. It sounds like you're frying a steak in the background. May I make a suggestion? If you have a cell phone, you might want to come on a cell phone instead. Okay. All right. We'll let you to work out his sound situation, and let's get started. Okay. Let me just grab a drink of water. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay. I'll be drinking a lot of water. Sorry, I've been a bit out of contact. We haven't done the regular Torah study. I've just been dealing with some of my own stuff. Doesn't matter what. Everything will be fine. But actually, as a result of it, I've decided to do a 14-day water fast, meaning I'm only drinking water, coffee, and tea, and taking supplements, multivitamins for 14 days. I'm now in day 8. So if anyone has ever done this or ever wants to do it, speak to me about it. It's been quite an interesting experience, I must say. Okay, anywho. So we're in the First Book of Maccabees. You guys don't need to translate. We don't need to translate from the Hebrew. Makes it a bit easier. So after Alexander, son of Philip, and you can follow along. Here's the link. Let me post the link. You can follow along this very link if you want to. I'll post it on the chat. There we go. Or you can just follow along on the screen. Whoa. Okay. What is going on here? Why is this stupid thing coming up? No, jeez. Please go away. Don't do that to me. Okay. Okay, let's see what happens if we do this. Oh my. All right. You can't beat him, join him. Oh, shoot. Oh, jeez. Hold on a second here. Let's make these 2. See what I said? You have to be a video and a sound engineer. First Maccabees 2. First Maccabees 1. All right. It's being difficult. Maybe I'll get a different version here. Or we can trick it. Okay, let's do this. Okay, good. After Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian who came from the land of Kittim, had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes, he succeeded him as king. So who is this Alexander? We have, of course, talking about Alexander the Great. Okay, Alexander the Great conquered a whole bunch of land. Again, I don't remember offhand. Out to India, I think as far east as India. Let's see for a second. Let's go to Rabbi Wikipedia. Alexander the Great. I don't want to get bogged down on every little thing. So Alexander Hamilton? No. Alexander the Great. By the way, it turns out Alexander Hamilton was Jewish. Look it up. I'm not making that up. Okay. So Alexander the Great succeeded his father Philip to the throne 336 BCE at the age of 20 and spent most of his ruling years conducting a lengthy military campaign through Western Asia, Central Asia, parts of South Asia, Europe. By the age of 30, he created one of the largest empires in history, stretching from Greece to northwestern India. He was undefeated in battle and is widely considered to be one of the history's greatest and most successful military commanders. And then he suddenly died at around the age of 32 or something like that, if I remember correctly. Well, here we go. Reign, birth, death, 32. Okay, so he died at the age of 32 suddenly. And what did he do? As we said, he split his empire. He knew he was going to die. and he split his empire up among his generals. And the general named Seleucus took over the land that included the land of Israel. And when we're talking about the Hanukkah story, we're talking about Israel during the period of the Seleucid kingdom. Okay, so we're talking about what's called the Seleucid Greeks. Okay, at any rate, Alexander the Great had land of Kittim. Land of Kittim, as Yehuda and I were studying before, is Cyprus. Okay, had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes. So basically, that was the end of the Persian Empire when Alexander the Great, in I think date usually given as 332 BCE, if I remember correctly, thereabouts. Again, we're not going to go a deep dive on everything. If somebody wants to correct me or fact correct me, please do. Okay, King Darius of the Persians and the Medes. So he defeated this King Darius. This King Darius, by the way, it should be pointed out, is not the same King Darius that's mentioned in the Tanakh, in the book of Nehemiah, and I believe also Ezra. This is a later King Darius, so please don't get the two confused. Okay, King Darius was the one. Let's see here, if I remember correctly. King Darius in the Tanakh is the one. So it's Darius is the one who lets Nehemiah, right? Kodesh announces it, and then I think Nehemiah was served Darius, but that was the original Darius. So we're talking about a much later Darius, right? Kings repeat their names in the same dynasties. Okay. Anyway, this was the end of the empire of the Persians and the Medes, who had taken over from the Babylonians. We read about that in the book of Daniel, right? That's the writing on the wall. Takel, what is it again? Mana takelu farsin. Basically, when Belshazzar sees the writing on the wall, it says that the Babylonian Empire is going to be destroyed. Its time is up, and it's going to be defeated by the Parsin, by the Persians. And that's what happens at that time. So that's when the Persian Empire took over from the Babylonians. The Babylonians, of course, we know, conquered the southern kingdom of Judea, as you can see in many of the books in the Tanakh, such as the end of the second book of Kings and the end of the book of Jeremiah. It's described in detail. And so now, Mida Keneged Mida, what goes around comes around. Now this is the end. So the Persians and the Medes took over from the Babylonians. Persians during the Persian and Median reign. This is when we have the story of the book of Esther, the Purim story. And now eventually the Persians and the Medes, their empire comes to an end, and they're conquered by Alexander the Great, okay? In around 332 BCE, if my memory serves me correctly. Again, fact check me, please. I'm not going to do deep dives, and I may be off a little bit here and there. You know, I'm not a computer. Okay, he fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and slaughtered kings of the earth. Can you please get out of here, stupid highlighting thing? He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. Okay, he gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they paid him tribute. Okay, that's what we know. Alexander the Great conquered from Greece, as we saw, all the way up to India. Let's check back in on future Hakham Yehuda. Yehuda? All right. Okay. All right. I guess he'll work it out when he works it out. All right, Yehuda, we're waiting for you. Okay. Okay. After this he fell sick and perceived that he was dying, so he summoned his most honored officers who had been brought up with him from his youth and divided his kingdom among him when he was still alive. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. So this is historically accurate. Okay. If you look up the history of Alexander the Great, then you will see that this is historically accurate. He died rather suddenly, but he knew he was going to die. He fell sick. He knew he was going to die. He didn't have any children, and he decided to split up his empire to his generals, to a couple of his generals. In fact, let's see. By the way, Alexander the Great is revered among the Jews. He kind of came in and saved the Jews from the Persian Empire, which I guess had become a little bit annoying, shall we say, and he was rather friendly to the Jews. He didn't try to impose any of Greek culture on the Jews, as did the later Seleucid kings, as we shall see. That's the whole Hanukkah story. So he's kind of well accepted by Jews, and many Jews to this day are named Alexander. Okay, let's see. King of Macedon, Ascension. We don't need all this. Welcome campaign, blah, 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 blah. Asia Minor. Basically, he kicked butt, right? Egypt, I kicked ass. All right, Persia. Fall of the Persian Empire in the East. Problems and plots. Coinage. Forays into the Indian subcontinent, ultimate Hellenistic army, later years in Persia, death and succession. Okay, so I think we want to read this part right here. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. All right, death and succession. Okay. On either 10th or 11th June 323 BCE, Alexander died in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar II in Babylon at age 30. At age 32. So he died in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. So just a side note on this. This is our Nebuchadnezzar. This is the Nebuchadnezzar who conquered Jerusalem. So how ironic that now Alexander was in the temple of Nebuchadnezzar the Great, the one who conquered Jerusalem, who then he ultimately conquered Jerusalem back from the Persians, who had conquered it from the Babylonians. I don't know. There's a certain, right, kind of full circle thing going on here. It should be noted, by the way, that this palace of Nebuchadnezzar the Great is known. It has been excavated, or maybe it's been around for a while. It's in Babylon. It's in Iraq, on the ancient ruins of Babylon. However, it was essentially destroyed by Saddam Hussein, or as my friend likes to call him, so damn insane, who's so damn gone at this point. But he decided that he was like the new Nebuchadnezzar, and he rebuilt the palace. And so a lot of the archaeological basis of the palace is now destroyed. And it's been rebuilt as Saddam Hussein's palace, but it still exists, and parts of it still harken back to the time of Nebuchadnezzar. At any rate, that's a side note. Okay. There are two different versions of Alexander's death, differing slightly in details. Plutarch's account is that roughly 14 days before his death, Alexander entertained Admiral blah, blah, blah. We don't need all this. Alexander developed a fever. We don't need all this. Doesn't matter. Okay. Second account, Alexander was struck with pain after downing a lot of. So basically, it says that he died very quickly, right? 12 days or 11 days after he became sick. Given the propensity, foul play featured, we don't need this. I just want to get to the part where he appoints his generals. Doesn't say that the poison conspiracy. This all doesn't matter. All doesn't matter. Let's talk about succession. We can find it. Not just skip it. Let's see it here. Let's see it here. Division of the Macedonian Empire. That's what we want. This is relevant now to the Hanukkah story. Alexander's death was so sudden that when reports of his own death reached Greece, they were not immediately believed. Alexander had no obvious or legitimate heir, his son Alexander IV by Roxanne being born after Alexander's death. According to Diodorus, who smelled twice, Alexander's companions asked him on his deathbed to whom he bequeathed his kingdom. His laconic reply was some Greek words, to the strongest. Another theory is that his successors willfully or erroneously misheard. All this doesn't matter. Let's find out what actually happened. Speechless by this time, playing the apocryphal story. Initially did not claim power. Last plans. This is all very detailed. And if we can't find it, we'll just skip it. Okay, it doesn't matter. Any rate, the kingdom was broken up. Okay. And let's see if we can find a map. Okay, it doesn't matter. The kingdom was broken up among a number of his generals, and the Seleucid kingdom is what the Hanukkah story is dealing with. Okay, let's go on here in the Book of Maccabees. Okay, then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their descendants after them for many years, and they caused many evils upon the earth. Now we get to Antiochus Epiphanes. He is the antagonist of the story. So the antagonist, the bad guy, is Antiochus Epiphanes. He is one of the Seleucid kings, the Seleucid king that ruled during the Hanukkah time, this time of the Hanukkah story. And the protagonist, as we shall see, is Judah Maccabee. And we'll get to him. Okay, from them came forth a sinful root. Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus, he had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. Let's look him up very briefly. Again, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I think these are the main figures of the story, so we should at least get a basic idea of who they are. Okay. Let's check in with Yehuda. Yehuda?
Hello.
Yeah. How we doing?
Yeah, am I okay? Can you hear me
perfect.
fine?
There we go. There
Great.
we go.
Yeah, I
right.
figured out what the problem was.
All right.
Yeah.
Nice,
All right.
man. Like I
Right.
said, if you want to be a Hakham, I'm telling you, the first thing you need to do is be a sound and video editor. Take my word on that one.
It was a pain in the tuchus to sort out. It took me ages to figure it out. But anyhow, I'm here.
It took you, let's see, it took you how long?
Half an hour?
Stream? Something like that. All right. So we're learning about Antiochus Epiphanes. All right. This is the famous Antiochus. If you want to chime in, or maybe you want to read this part, I'll just highlight it on the screen.
Yeah,
And
I'll
you can
read
read.
it. All right. What? So that's Antiochus. Is that the first IV?
The fourth.
First?
The fourth.
Fourth. All right. Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, dated around 215 BC, November or December time to 164 BC, was a Greek Hellenist king who ruled the Seleucid Empire from 175 BC until his death in 164 BC. He was
Meaning,
a
if I
son
could
of
just interrupt there, I
Yeah.
believe that's either the same year or 1 year after the Hanukkah story takes place.
yes,
Or the rededication of the temple.
yeah, because
Mhm.
that was what 160 BCE, 162.
If my memory serves me correct, it was 165 BCE, but it might have been 164 BCE. So basically, right around the time that we rededicated the temple, this guy, buys the farm. All right, let's
Yeah.
go on. He was a son.
He was a son of King Antiochus III the Great, originally named Mithridates, or possibly its earlier alternative form.
And by the way, it should
Mithridates.
just be pointed out that Mithra
Comes
was
from the Persians, wasn't it? Yeah.
I believe
No,
from the
was it the
Persians, but it's the name
Persians?
of a foreign
Yeah.
god. I know the Romans were big on Mithra, into Mithraism later.
Mithras.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Anyway, let's go on.
Or possibly its earlier alternative form, Mithridates.
Mhm.
He assumed the name Antiochus either after the death of his elder brother Antiochus or when he ascended the throne. Notable events during Antiochus's reign include his near conquest of Ptolemaic Egypt.
And if I could just point out, we mentioned that after Alexander the Great, his kingdom was split up among a number of generals. The one more to the south, including Egypt, was Ptolemy. So we're talking about Ptolemaic Egypt. We're talking about one of these sister Greek kingdoms. So it's basically at this point Greek versus Greek. It's Greek on Greek, something we really don't want to think about at all. Anyway, go on.
His persecution of the Jews of Judea and Samaria, and the rebellion of the Jewish Maccabees.
Yep. Okay, so we don't need all of this information here.
No.
Blah, 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 blah. Let's skip ahead. Okay, this is kind of important.
All right.
Just explains his name. It explains his name.
Yeah. Antiochus's often eccentric behavior and capricious actions during his interactions with common people, such as appearing in the public bathhouses and applying for municipal offices, led some of his contemporaries to call him
dog catcher. Like dog catcher, something like that. Yeah, go on.
To call him Epimanes, I can pronounce the Greek, or the Mad, a
Yeah.
wordplay on his title.
Right. So he's known as
Epiphany?
he was known as a nutcase.
Mhm.
Is the point? Okay. All right. We don't. Yeah. Did you want to say something, Yehuda?
No, not anything about that.
Okay. So let's see if there's anything else we need to know about this guy. Persecution. Okay. Let's read this just to get an overview. The persecution of the Jews and the Maccabean revolt.
All right. The Seleucids, like the I can't pronounce the Ptolemies.
Forget the P.
Ptolemies.
It's a silent P.
Ptolemies
Say
before
Ptolemies,
them. I
yeah.
thought it was like held a suzerainty over Judea. They
Let me just
respected
explain the
Jewish
word-
culture.
Let me just explain
Yeah.
the word suzerainty because it's not a common word. Suzerainty means basically a ruler to subject relationship. In other words, Judea was the subjects of the Ptolemaic of the Seleucid kingdom, of the Seleucid Greeks,
Mhm.
meaning they paid them tribute. They were controlled basically by the Seleucid Greeks.
Mhm. They respected Jewish culture and protected Jewish institutions. This policy was drastically reversed by Antiochus IV, seemingly after what was either a dispute over the leadership of the temple in Jerusalem and the office of high priest, or possibly a revolt whose nature was lost to time after being crushed.
Okay. All right, let's see. The revolt of the usually tricking the Jews. Let's see. However, according to the prices, it doesn't matter. This is all too detailed. Jason gathered forces and made a surprise attack on the city of Jerusalem. Okay, we're gonna get to all this in the Book of Maccabees. So I think we can just skip all this. Okay, so we know who Antiochus IV Epiphanes is. He's the antagonist of the Hanukkah story. Okay. All right, let's get back into the Book of Maccabees here. So we're in verse 11. So, okay, would you like to read these verses here?
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
All right. What, from verse 10 or from verse 11?
11, the highlighted
All
one.
right. Okay, brilliant. In those days, certain renegades came out from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the nations around us. For since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us." This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the nations.
If I could just stop for a second, I could just point something out. So we're talking about what is often called to this day Hellenized Jews, assimilated Jews. Okay, Jews who rejected their ancient traditions, who rejected the covenant of the Torah, and said, "We want to be like all the nations around us." We've all seen this phenomenon both here in Israel and in anywhere else that Jews have gone, like maybe Germany, right? I believe that assimilation was one of the things that led to the Holocaust.
Pogroms.
Assimilation, by the way, also by the so-called religious Jews. They were still staying in Germany. At any rate, so there we go. We're talking about what is often called as Hellenized Jews. And I had an old rabbi who shall remain nameless, but he always used to point out that the real battle of the Maccabees was not so much against the Greeks as it was against the Hellenized Jews. So we'll see if that plays itself out when we read through whatever portion of the Book of Maccabees we're going to cover. All right, go on. Verse 14.
All right. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the customs of the nations.
Which,
and
by the
made
way, very specifically, a gymnasium there doesn't mean, a workout place. It's gym. The word gymnos, I believe in Greek, means naked. And so it was a place where everybody got naked and basically worked out. So we're talking about.
Wait. So when it says "and made foreskins for themselves," that's saying because basically the Greeks wouldn't allow the Jews to participate in their sports because they were circumcised. They thought circumcision was disgusting.
Yep.
So I guess when they
actually had surgeries to re-sew skins onto their
Mhm.
onto their their dinglings.
Yeah. Which I
believe.
mean, this demonstrates the extremity these people went to.
Right.
You know.
To be like the surrounding nations, as we see
Yeah.
among so many Jews in so many places over the years and over the centuries, right? So
Mm,
they really wanted to be Hellenized. They wanted to be like the Greeks. They abandoned Judaism, they abandoned the ancient traditions, and they said, enough of this. That's old stuff. We want to be modernized. We want to be modern, cosmopolitan Greeks, and that's what they became.
Well, if you think about it, the Bris Milah, that's the very act of entering into the covenant. So when you make a foreskin for yourself, or when you do something such as that, you're destroying the very premise of the covenant in the first place.
Yep,
You
you're
know.
destroying the sign that is
Yeah.
etched into our bodies that we are
Mhm.
in permanent covenant with Yahweh. Absolutely, it's an
Mhm.
undoing. It's like taking the covenant. It's like taking the Torah, ripping it up, throwing it in the garbage, and saying, "I don't want any more of this." Basically,
Yeah.
all right.
All right. So
Then
the
the Holy
Bill of
Covenant, they joined
Gymnasium.
with the nations and sold themselves to do evil. All right, let's go down
Yeah.
to verse 15. To verse. Is there verse 15 here? Verse 16. Okay, go ahead, Yuda.
Verse 16. All right. When Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt, in order that he may reign over both kingdoms. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants and cavalry, and with a large fleet.
All right, stop for 1 second.
Engaged.
Let me just point out. So again, what
All
we
right.
see throughout the period of the generals' kingdoms is that they're constantly invading each other and taking over each other's land. So we saw earlier that it was alluded to earlier that the Ptolemies actually ruled over the land of Israel for a while, and then it was conquered by the Seleucids. And now we have the Seleucids trying to go down and conquer their sister Greek empire, the Ptolemies. So these sister empires are constantly going back and forth at each other. Maybe a good example would be, I don't know, Europe before the European Union, right? They're constantly fighting each other, taking over each other's territory, kind of something like that. All right, go on.
All right.
Yes.
17.
Okay. 17.
So he invaded Egypt with a strong. Oh yeah, okay. Verse
That's
18.
fine.
All right. He engaged King Ptolemy of Egypt in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. They captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt.
So basically, Antiochus, the Seleucid Empire, now took over Egypt from the Ptolemaic Empire, or from the Ptolemaic Kingdom, I should say. All right. Next.
20. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus turned back in the 143rd year and
Stop
went
for
up
1 second.
against.
I just want to explain this 143rd year. This is the account. This is called the Seleucid calendar, and this is the 143rd year means the 143rd year after Seleucus took over Seleucus became king of this kingdom. Okay, so there's a lot of different year counts. This is not talking about 143 BCE or anything like that. In fact, it couldn't be because there was no such concept then. The whole concept came after Jesus was born, right? That's where we get CE, BCE. So this is talking about the 143rd year in the Seleucid count or in the Seleucid calendar. Okay. So if Seleucid, just to do a rough estimate, I could look it up, but I don't want to get sidetracked here. So if Alexander broke up his kingdom, or if he died in 323 BCE, was it? We'll say 320. I think it was 323 BCE. So that's when the kingdom was split up. So we're talking about 143 years after 323. So we have to do 323 minus 143. So 323 minus 100 is going to be 223 minus 40 is going to be 183 and minus 3. So we're talking about 180 BCE, give or take. That's what we're talking about here. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstand for the lights, and all its utensils.
Okay.
He took also the
1 second. Let me just point out the golden altar is referring to the altar of incense, not the sacrificial altar. The sacrificial altar is plated with or is covered with copper, not gold. The incense altar is is it pure gold? No, I believe it's acacia wood covered with gold. The lampstand is the menorah, and so on. So basically, he went into the inner sanctuary and started taking out all of the expensive furniture.
All right. He took also the table for the bread of the presents, the cups for the drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the
By the way, it
silver.
doesn't mention here, but he also took the picture of Rabbi Menachem Schneerson off the wall. And sorry, bad joke.
He took the silver and the gold in the costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures that he found, taking them all. I know, you've got me giggling now. Right, taking them all. He went into his own land.
Yep. All right. So, right. So he went back to his own land, wherever his headquarters were. I don't remember offhand. Doesn't matter. Okay,
yeah, didn't you know the Maccabees studied tenure?
Of course. Along with they studied it with Shimon Bar Yochai.
Yeah.
In a cave. All right, go on.
All right. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply in every community. Rulers and elders groaned. Oh. All right. Young women and young men became faint. The beauty of the women faded. Every bridegroom took up the lament. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land trembled for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. So let's put this again in perspective. So we're talking about in the year 180 BCE. If I'm doing my math correctly, again, fact check me if I'm wrong. I don't have all of the sources in front of me, and it doesn't matter. I just want to get the more or less general picture. So 180 BCE, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, the crazy man, comes in, defiles the temple, takes out all of the, or at least he takes out all of the expensive furniture of the temple, which basically renders it no longer usable, right? You cannot, if we can't carry out these various ceremonies, have the menorah and the incense and the incense altar, etc., then it's a problem. Here we have a kind of, this is a poem. We could see this is kind of poetic, and that's why in the text here it's laid out in verse rather than in prose, right? So just keep in mind that this is not necessarily meant to be taken literally. This is kind of meant to be poetic verses. Young women and young men became faint. The beauty of women faded. Every bridegroom took up the lament. Right? We can see already it's kind of a piyut, or kind of a lamentation poem, right? Okay, so next, let's go down to here.
All right, the occupation of Jerusalem. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tributes, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully, he spoke with peaceful words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, and tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. They took captive the women and the children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a large, strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They stationed there a sinful nation, men who were renegades. These strengthened their position.
Okay, so let me just point out men who were renegades. We saw from above, this means the Hellenistic Jews. So they basically, it's almost like in the concentration camp where they put the kapos in charge of the rest of the Jewish prisoners, right? Kind of the same simulation. So these were the Hellenized Jews who now were basically guarding or protecting the interests, protecting the conquests of Antiochus IV in after conquering Jerusalem. Okay.
These people strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem. They stored them there and became a great menace.
So basically, here we have here Antiochus, or the Seleucid Greeks, takeover and destruction of the city of Jerusalem. This is 2 years later. It says 2 years later than what? 2 years later of what's mentioned here, 143rd year of the Seleucid count. If we dated this 143rd year to, again, give or take 180 BCE, so we're talking now about 178 BCE is when Jerusalem is conquered and despoiled by the armies of Antiochus IV with the help of the Hellenized Jews. Okay, and here we have again poetry, right? So go ahead.
For the citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary. There we are. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled. She became a dwelling of strangers. So, in this case, would the words be? Because I feel it may matter, given that there's a bit of debate. Would the words be Gerim, or would they be?
No, probably Zarim. Probably Zarim. If, again, as we spoke about earlier, there is no original. It's believed that the First Book of Maccabees was originally written in Hebrew, but that original version has been lost, and the oldest one we have is in the Greek from the Septuagint. So we wouldn't. I mean, I guess we could know by looking at the Greek word and then figuring out what that Greek word is usually translated from in the Hebrew. But no, it would definitely not be Gerim. It would probably be something like Zarim.
Because if you, let's say, pick up the Living Torah by Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, he translates Gerim as converts, and we know that's not what it means. So, if you tried to reverse translate this, it might come up as Ger, and you might think, oh, these are converts.
Ger is not a stranger.
Exactly.
Ger is usually translated as sojourner. So stranger is something different. So it would probably, if we would find the original Hebrew, I'm guessing it would be something like Zar, maybe Nochri, probably Zar.
She became strange to her offspring, and her children forsook her.
She is Jerusalem, by the way, just to keep things in perspective here.
Of course. And her children forsook her. The sanctuary became desolate like a desert. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into a reproach, her honor into contempt. Her dishonor now grew as great as her glory. Her exaltation was turned into mourning.
So it should just be pointed out that really Jerusalem or Judea was kind of going through a flourishing period from the time of the return of the exiles, right, during the times of Zerubbabel, Nehemiah, Ezra, or Ezra Nehemiah. We see that then the Second Temple was rebuilt at this point, or then Alexander the Great took over from the Persians. Alexander the Great was friendly towards the Jews, and so it seems that from the time of the return of the exiles until now, until 180 BCE essentially, or until the beginning of the reign of Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, that Judea had kind of been going through had been going through a flourishing period, and now that ends abruptly. Okay, 41.
I got 1 second.
Any comments you want to add, Yehuda, or anyone else?
No, not that I can think of. All right. Right, installation of Gentile cults. So the word would be Greek, right? Because the word Gentile is often translated as Greek anyway.
This is not part of the text. This is just the chapter headlines added by this translation. So that's not even part of the text. So Gentiles are irrelevant.
All right. All right. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that all should give up their particular customs. All the nations accepted the command of the king. Many
Stop right there. I just want to point out what we're talking about here is Hellenization, right? The Antiochus the fourth has decided that he wants to Hellenize his entire kingdom. Everyone should follow Greek traditions. Hellenization. Okay.
Many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane Sabbaths and festivals, to defile the sanctuary and the holy ones, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals, to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they would forget the law, Torah, and change all the ordinances. He added, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die.
Okay, so we have here forced assimilation, convert or die, basically, is what we're talking about. This pagan, Greek, idol worshipping, polytheistic religion. We all know. We all learned Greek mythology and back in high school or junior high school or even elementary school. We all know what we're talking about: Zeus, Athena, all those dudes, right? So all this was a little bit before that period, but I'm sure they're already worshiping those same gods. At any rate, so all of this is by death, right? Don't keep the Sabbath. If you keep the Sabbath, you die. Okay, sanctuary defiled, unclean animals and worship and sacrifices to these pagan gods, these pagan Greek gods, being performed in the temple. Okay, circumcise and die. Okay, so
because if you think about it, Melech, there's two things which are a sign of a Jew, or at least a sign of the covenant. Bris Milah, the bris, circumcision, and Shabbat, the Sabbath. So
those are two of them.
You could
there are others, but yes, those are two.
Yes, of course. But you could have somebody who, as we mentioned earlier, might have sewn skin or made foreskins of themselves, who might still, even after that, be tempted to come back to the original path the proper way, and they might try to observe Shabbat, because if you're not in somebody's private docile, you don't know.
Maybe could have been like a crypto Jew.
This demonstrates that, at least from my perspective, even after all of this, there could still be the temptation, not the temptation, but the desire to come back to the original way. And this is a strong deterrent to say, don't
do it.
Basically
to really wean them off.
Trying to articulate it.
Their ancient.
But you see what I'm saying? It would be easier to come back, even despite after going to the extreme of making foreskins for yourself, destroying one side of the covenant.
Yep, he tried to eradicate every remnant of the covenant, and I think the scariest thing here is that many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. Again, we're talking about the Hellenized Jews. Okay, all right, let's move on to here.
Okay. All right.
You go ahead and read. 1 second. I just have to take care of something. Go right ahead.
Brilliant. Oh, you've come off. Let's get back on. All right. Do you want to scroll up a little bit more, Melech? So 51 is a little bit. Okay. All right. In such words, he wrote to his whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors all over the people. And he commanded the towns of Judah to offer sacrifice, town by town. Many of the people, everyone who forsook the law, the Torah, joined them, and they did evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding in every place of refuge they had.
Okay. So let's just summarize here. Town by town, many of the people, everyone who forsook the Lord, joined them, and they did evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding in every place of refuge they had. In other words, the Jews who were still loyal and we're going to find out about one coming up very soon. Basically went into hiding. They became crypto Jews. They would not give in to these demands. They would not give in to these laws, and they practiced their Judaism in places that were far away from the cities in secret. Basically, they became crypto Jews. And that's where the Maccabees are going to arise from these kind of crypto Jews, as we shall see. All right.
Now, on the 15th day of Kislev, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege on the altar of burnt offering. They also built.
And a couple of very important points here. Okay, first of all, we see this is the 145th year. Okay, so 143rd year was when Antiochus, and that's when he first attacked Jerusalem and took the furniture out of the temple. We saw 2 years later is when he destroyed Jerusalem, so that would be the year 145. And so here we have 145. So in that same year, he sets up this desolating sacrilege, okay, and on the Temple Mount, which of course is going to be an idol, some kind of Greek idol. Okay, so now instead of Yahweh being worshipped in the temple, now this Greek idol is being worshipped in the temple. It should also be pointing out that this word desolating sacrilege, although it is a translation of a translation, is very possibly referring back to the book of Daniel, where he speaks about, how do they usually translate it, as an abomination of desolation, right? This prophecy. In fact, we can find it. Just 1 second, very briefly. Abomination of desolation. So the book of Daniel. So abomination of it even says here. Is a phrase from the book of Daniel describing the pagan sacrifice. No. So let's blah 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 blah. Let me just find it where it is in the book of Daniel, and if not, we can't. And then let's do it this way. Hold on 1 second, just very briefly. Torah, let's bring this up. Let's do a search on the word desolation. Okay. Ezekiel. One second. Where is it? Lexicon? No. Strong's multi-parallel. Oh, darn. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's mentioned in the book of Daniel as a prophecy that will happen in the future, that there will be an abomination of desolation, is the way it's usually translated, set up. So I don't think that this may be the fulfillment of that prophecy. On the other hand, it may be the author of the book of Maccabees, knowing that Daniel speaks about this abomination of desolation, and now referring to what the Antiochus IV has done as deliberately hearkening back to those words in the book of Daniel. At any rate, this is a clear reference to the book of Daniel. Okay.
Okay. Right. They also built altars in the surrounding towns of Judah and offered incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. The books of the law that they found tore to pieces and burned with fire. Anyone found possessing the book of the covenant, or anyone who adhered to the law, was condemned to death by decree of the king. They kept using violence against Israel, against those who found month after month in the towns. On the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice in the...
Right there. 25th day of what month?
Kislev.
Right, which is Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah occurs on the 25th day of the month of Kislev. So we have to keep in mind, right? The Torah is very big on this, and now we see this followed through later Judaism, right? It's already ingrained in the Jewish psyche that historical dates have meaning, right? So on the 25th day of this month, Kislev, meaning on the same day that later is when the temple will be rededicated, okay? on purpose on that day, right? What did they do?
Yeah.
The Greeks offered sacrifice on the altar that was on top of the altar burnt offering. So they set up this abomination of desolation, or this desolating sacrilege, and now they start burning offerings to these foreign gods on the 25th day of Kislev. Okay, they start this process, and this is in the 145th year. Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
So let's keep that in mind, right, for later
According
on.
to yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
According to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised, and their families and those who circumcised them, and they hung their infants from their mothers' necks.
Lovely. Sounds like Nazis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, verse 62.
But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat unclean food. They chose to die rather than be defiled by food. Or to profane the holy covenant, and they did die. Very great wrath came upon Israel.
Okay. So we're talking about
which
martyrs.
is funny because even in rabbinical Judaism, there are three things of which you must allow yourself to die for. You know, and one of them is if somebody puts a sword to your neck to force convert you, you have to say Shema and let them.
Idol worship.
You know.
Yep.
Right. Exactly right.
Immorality. And murder. You can't murder somebody else to save your own life. Correct. So, but I don't think it's referring to that. It's just saying these people decided these are people we have throughout history, people who have decided to be martyrs for many different religions. Here we have loyal Israelites, loyal Jews who decided I'd rather die than go into your religion. I had a friend the other day who's a Christian say to me, because I'm going through a certain situation right now.
Sorry to interrupt you, Melech. I'll be 10 seconds. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. I had a friend the other day say to me, I'm going through a certain situation right now, which I alluded to. It doesn't matter, nothing major. But she said to me, she's a Christian. She said to me, I will pray to Jesus for you. And I told her, and I literally meant it. I said, I'd rather die. Please do not do that. I don't know if she did anyway, but not with my consent. That's for sure. Okay, so anywho, that's the end of the first chapter of the book of Maccabees, of the first book of Maccabees. We're now going to move on to chapter 2. Let's see how we do this here. How do we go to chapter 2? Do I just do 2? Let's try that. Okay, that worked. Maccabees 2. And now we are going to get to Matityahu. Okay, should we wait for Daniel for a second? We'll give him 10 or 15 seconds. If he doesn't come back, I'll go ahead and read. Any questions, any comments so far, by the way? Any questions or any comments so far? Oh, wow, lots of people joining. Glad to have you all. All right. All right, let's go on to chapter 2. So that's the setup. Now we met the antagonist, Antiochus Epiphanes, the fourth Epiphanes, crazy man. And now we're going to meet the protagonist. Okay. So in those days, let me just grab a cup of water. 1 second. That's good. Okay, in those days, Matityahu, in Hebrew, we see the name Yahu or the phrase Yahu in Matityahu, like Netanyahu, like Eliyahu, like Chizkiyahu, right? Son of John, son of Simeon, a priest of the clan of Jorib. So he's a priest. That's the important thing here. And it's giving his lineage just as we see so many times in the Tanakh. Lineage is given. Lineage is, of course, given always by the father. It's the fatherly line that is important for determining a person's identity. So we're talking about a priest. We're talking about a Kohen here. And the Hashmonean dynasty, as we mentioned before at the beginning of the study, is basically a dynasty of priests. It's basically a priestly dynasty that rose to be the kings over Judea. This was one of the criticisms, the false criticisms of the Pharisees against the Hasmoneans. They said that there's too much power is concentrated in the hands of the Kohanim. They're both the priests and now the kings, and that was one of their excuses to destroy the Hasmoneans, which they did with glee. Okay, so he moved from Jerusalem and settled in Modi'in. Modi'in is a big city. I won't say big, but a city today in Jerusalem. And then there are other surrounding, small yishuvim, small communities around Modi'in. But Modi'in is, maybe about 20 minutes from Tel Aviv. You can look it up on a map. And it's in that same area where the original Modi'in is. So we're talking about 20 minutes from Tel Aviv in modern Israel, okay? Or in ancient Israel, but there was no Tel Aviv there. Tel Aviv was in Babylon back then. All right, he had 5 sons. John, surnamed Gadi. Simon, called Tassi. Judas, called Maccabeus. And there we go. Eleazar, called Avaran. And Jonathan, called Aphas. He saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem and said, okay, so let's just flesh this out here. So Matthias, he is the patriarch of the entire of the Maccabees, of the Maccabean army, of eventually the Hasmonean kingdom, the second independent commonwealth of Judah, who will free Israel from the Seleucid Greeks, from these horrible oppressions of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Okay, and here we have 5 sons. We're gonna the book will mention all 5 of them, but of course the most famous one is Yehuda Maccabee, Judah Maccabeus. Okay, Maccabeus, as we saw earlier, probably means hammer, and because he hammered his enemies. But all of them have, right? All of them have nicknames, but we never remember John the Gadi or Simon the Tassi, right? If you ever want a nice trivia quiz, then what was Simon, the son of Matityahu? What was his nickname? Tassi. Okay. At any rate, this guy is Judah Maccabee is going to be the main player, as we shall see, right? And some of these sons will die. Okay. At any rate, so Matityahu, the father of the 5 sons, okay, now recites this poem. So we have poetry again, right? Yuda, you want to take it over, or you want me to read it?
Yeah, I can continue. All right. Alas, okay. Alas, why was I born to see this? The ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city. The people sat idle there when it was given over to the enemy, the sanctuary given over to the strangers. Her temple has become like a person without honor. Her glorious vessels have been carried into exile. Her infants have been killed in her streets, her youths by the sword of the foe. What nation has not inherited her palaces and has not seized her spoils? All her adornment has been taken away. No longer free, she has become a slave. And see, our holy place, our beauty, and our glory have been laid waste. The nations have profaned them. Why should we live any longer?
Okay. All right. So now let's see what Matityahu does about it. Go.
All right. The king's officers who were enforcing the apostasy came to the town of Modin to make them offer sacrifice. Many from Israel came to them, and Mattathias and his sons were assembled. Then the king's officers spoke to Mattathias as follows: You are a leader, honored and great in this town, and supported by sons and brothers. Now be the first to come, and do what the king commands, as all the nations and the people of Judah, and those who are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons will be numbered among the friends of the king, and you and your sons will be honored with silver and gold and many gifts.
Okay, so they're trying to buy Matityahu, right? They're trying to offer him honor, money, be friends of the king. How many, just a kind of side point, how many Jews do we know over the years who have done exactly this? All of these modern Hellenized Jews who went to support the peace plan, who spoke about, this two-state solution, who said that we can coexist with the Palestinians, just quote unquote Palestinians, just give our land away, right? We see, and what did they do it in return for? For honor, for money. They get flown around in private jets to give lectures at the World Economic Forum and Davos and all these kinds of stuff, and they get honor and rewards and honorary PhDs and all this crap, right? So we see that this is human nature. So it goes back to ancient times to try to buy your loyalty with money and glory and status in society. And sadly, to this day, too many Jews have fallen for that. That's why we have, in this day and age, we have these quote unquote left-wing Hellenized Jews here in Israel and in the United States. A couple of names come to mind. What's the name of that wacko professor? Oh my God, the guy really needs a lobotomy or electroshock therapy. What's his name again? Norman Finkelstein. Oh my God, that guy! I want to vomit whenever I see him on talking. The guy, seriously, the guy needs like electroshock therapy. He's an absolute traitor to his own people. He's a lunatic, an absolute lunatic. And there are plenty of others where that came from. Some still alive, and some have since departed this earth to meet their eternal fate. All right, verse 19.
But Mattathias answered and said in a loud voice, even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to obey his commandments, every one of them abandoning the religion of their ancestors, I and my sons and my brothers will continue to live by the covenant of our ancestors. For be it from us to the desert, the law
to desert the law. Mm-hmm.
Yes, to desert the law. Sorry, and all the ordinances.
Yehuda, you do the Torah readings in your synagogue, so you're used to being corrected, right?
Yeah,
wrong, right?
I know, all the time.
Every Baal Koreh has to deal with that one, right?
Every fourth word.
Right, and the audience and the congregation loves to wait for the Baal Koreh to get something wrong and shout it out like, "You idiot!" right?
Yeah, because they're a Hakham. Yeah, they're what Hebreologist, whatever they call them, Hebreist. Anyway,
yeah.
All right. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our religion to the right hand or to the left.
So basically, Matityahu gives this officer a big F you, right? Go F yourself, right? Mm-hmm. In simple terms.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's not a good thing to do. He's going to get in trouble. Let's see what happens.
All right. All right. When he had finished speaking these words, a Jew came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice on the altar in Modin, according to the king's command. When Mattathias saw it, he burned with zeal, and his heart was stirred. He gave vent to righteous anger. He ran and slaughtered him on the altar. At the same time, he killed the king's officer. He was forcing them to sacrifice, and he tore down the altar. Thus he burned with zeal for the law, just as Phinehas did against Zimri, son of Salu.
Mm-hmm. So we have here, and it's pointed out explicitly here. So this is right. This is zealousness, right? Pinchas was zealous for the law of Yahweh. He was zealous for Yahweh. He took up the sword right, in his own hands, and struck down Zimri. And this is back in the book of Numbers. We'll get to it eventually in our weekly Torah studies. And so this is now the same kind of thing. Yahweh can't take it anymore. He just decides he's going to take the law into his own hands. He's going to be a vigilante, a renegade, and he takes the law into his own hands and slaughters not only the Jew, right? So that's kind of what Pinchas did to Zimri. Not only the Jew who was taking part in this idol worship, but actually also the king's officer. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have an explicit reference back to Zimri. We don't need to go back and look at the story of Zimri. If we were studying for 10 hours, we would do that. But you guys all know or should know the story of Pinchas in the Torah, which we'll get to eventually in our weekly Torah studies. Okay. Go on.
Then Mattathias cried out in the town with a loud voice, saying, not saying, come on, let everyone who is, you came off for a second.
Okay.
I was making a facetious comment. Let everyone who is zealous for the Lord and supports the covenant come out with me. Then he and his sons fled to the hills and left all that they had in their town.
Mm-hmm. Also, kind of a reference back to the phrase in the Torah, mi li Yahweh Elai, who is for Yahweh, come to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's it. They fled. So basically, they decided it's time to get the heck out of Dodge, and they went and hid in the hills, as so many people end up hiding in various wars. If you go in the hills are harder to detect where people are. They're harder to conquer. They're harder to send armies into, and that's what they did. They're in Modi'in. Modi'in is kind of in the flatlands. Again, maybe we should just get a quick map of Israel here. Maps, just to get an idea of where it is. I'll just look at the modern town of Modi'in. It's in the same general area. I don't remember where the ancient one is, but if we look, all right, so Jerusalem. So we gotta go west, young man. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can get everything in perspective. Safat Hebron, there's Beit Shemesh, Kiryat Malachi, there it is, Modi'in. Okay, so there's Modi'in. Okay, so we could see it's not far from the big cities of the big coastal cities, Tel Aviv, Rishon LeZion, even Ashdod, right? It's right over here, and it's a pretty decent sized city these days. I don't know how many it has. I'm guessing at least 50,000 by this point. It's really become a major satellite city of the coastal cities, and there it is. But it's not yet up in the hills. Okay, it's kind of maybe in the beginning of the foothills, but basically it's flat. So they fled into the hills. Where are the hills? Well, it's not here. This is the Shvela. This is all flat coastal. This is the flat coastal plain. They fled up into the hills, into the Judean hills. So wherever, somewhere in this area. Okay, they fled east. All right. Where do we go? So fled. Okay, verse 29.
Okay. At that time, many who were seeking righteousness and justice went down to the wilderness to live there. They, their sons, their wives, and their livestock, because troubles pressed heavily upon them. And it was reported to the king's officers and to the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, that those who had rejected the king's command had gone down to the hiding places in the wilderness.
Kind of like, just to point out, kind of like the Jews did during the Bar Kokhba rebellions, right? They fled into the wilderness, into the caves, into the hills, into the wilderness. Okay, verse 32. Go ahead.
Many pursued them and overtook them. They encamped opposite them and prepared for battle against them on the Sabbath day and Shabbat. They said to them, "Enough of this. Come out and do what the king commands, and you will live." But they said, "We will not come out, nor will we. do what the king commands, and so profane the Sabbath day.
Okay, so stop.
Then the
So
enemy.
this is a very important point here. They would
It's
not fight
refusal.
on. Yeah, they would not. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Yehuda. You can say it if you want.
No, I was just saying it's absolute refusal, not
They
obeying,
wouldn't
not
fight on
giving in.
Shabbat. They wouldn't fight on Shabbat, right?
Mhm.
And we'll
Yeah.
see the consequences of that, and then we'll see what the decision is. But we see that this is, it couldn't possibly, right? It couldn't possibly be logical. It couldn't possibly be the meaning of Shabbat that
Mhm.
when your life is in danger, to still keep the of Shabbat. It wouldn't make any logical sense whatsoever, because the enemy would know, any enemy would know, these people don't fight on a certain day, or they don't fight blah blah blah, and they're going to attack them on those days. It's exactly why in 1973 that the Arab armies attacked on Yom Kippur, the Yom Kippur War, right? They knew the Jews were not up to fighting that day, or not prepared to fight on that day, and they attacked. So the same thing here. The Greeks know that, or the Greeks anticipate that the Jews are not going to fight on Shabbat, and so that's when they attack. And the Jews foolishly at that point, the Maccabean armies foolishly at that point say, "We will not fight you on the Shabbat." So they become sitting ducks, as we shall see, verse 35.
They said to them, "Enough of this, come out and do what the king commands, and you will live." But they said, "We will not come out, nor will we do what the king commands, and so profane the Sabbath day." Then the enemy quickly attacked them, but they did not answer them or hurl a stone at them, or block up their hiding places. For they said, "Let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly." So they attacked them on the Sabbath, and they died, with their wives and children and livestock, to the number of 1,000 persons.
Right. So we see here they refused to violate the Sabbath, to fight on Shabbat, and it became like shooting fish in a barrel, as the expression goes. We see here, I see the same phenomenon a lot of times in modern Judaism, in modern Orthodox Judaism, not in the case of a life being at risk, because there they have they have incorporated the concept of pikuach nefesh, but many other things where Jews will be so righteous that they will not do things on Shabbat, which honestly they should be doing, to maybe not to save a life, but maybe things that they should be doing, like, I don't know, what would be an example? Maybe they have a dog that got injured and it needs to be taken to the vet, but they'll say, well, it's not pikuach nefesh, it's not a human being, and so they'll let the dog, die, because they're being so righteous that they will not violate the Shabbat to save the dog. In my opinion, as I've said many times, there are not 613 mitzvot in the Torah. There are actually 614. 613 is a made-up number, by the way, but I just use it as, that's the common number. And the 614th mitzvah is anything that does not make common sense, does not make
that which is not common sense, don't do.
Yeah, that which does not integrate with common sense, then don't do it or violate it, right? So there has to be a little common sense. All the mitzvot are there, but there are always exceptions. There's always an exception to every single mitzvah, and one has to apply their logic and their common sense.
Yeah.
Yahweh does not want us to keep the mitzvot as a be all and end all. There are logical times where, for one reason or another, you violate the mitzvot, and it doesn't have to be written in stone. Each person has to kind of make up their decisions. I know I have a couple of cats that I love those little creatures, and if anything were to happen to them on Shabbat, that would be it. I would 100% break Shabbat without even thinking twice, to save their lives or to save their limb or anything that would cause permanent damage to them, without even thinking twice. So we see here being too religious for your own good, which is a phenomenon, unfortunately, that we see in Orthodox Judaism down to this very day. Okay. Any comments you want to add there, Yehuda?
I was going to say that for me is not true righteousness. You're not a tzaddik if you allow things like that to happen.
You're a fool.
I don't believe a Kadosh Baruch Hu would expect you to, let things that you love. It's not as if it's an instrument or it's a kitchen utensil, right? It's a life. It's a life form. God would not allow you
Listen,
to
the
let
rabbi
an
said that
innocent.
you're not even allowed to save the life of a goy on Shabbat.
No,
what they say.
I've.
Oh, yes. They no, but they do say that. But then they say, but it's not halacha lema'aseh. It's not
Right.
in the final halacha because they say it'll cause bad relations with the goyim. But the underlying halacha, if it weren't to make bad relations with the goyim, would be that you are not even allowed to save the life of a goy on Shabbat. That's rabbinical halacha. That's rabbinical underlying halacha. And
Are you sure?
I am 100%
I.
sure.
Because
The Talmud,
I've always seen. All right.
Oh no, halacha lama'aseh is you do, because if you let a goy die, then the goyim are going to get mad at us, and we don't want the goyim mad at us. We're living among them, and so we save the life of a goy on Shabbat. But all things being equal, if that weren't the case, then you are not allowed to break Shabbat, and break Shabbat means, by the rabbinical standard, means even carrying a key outside of the eruv, right? You're not allowed to even do something like that.
God, yeah.
Save the life
But
of
you
a
can
goy.
lift. You can lift a couch in your home, though, right?
Yeah, you can
Up and down the stairs, but you can't do
you can
that.
rearrange your. All right. Any rate, that's
Separate
that's
matter.
right. So it just points out that the rabbinical Judaism really thinks of the goyim as basically animals. Really, no exaggeration, and it's disgusting,
Unless
honestly.
you're a Ben Noach.
Yeah. I guess if you're Ben Noach, then I guess
Ben
you're
Noach, then you're what? You're Sadiq. You're righteous among the nations, but everyone else
there.
is trash.
Okay. Yep.
But anyway.
All right. Verse 39.
All right. When Mattathias and his friends learned of it, they mourned for them deeply, and all said to their neighbors, "If we all do as our kindred have done and refuse to fight with the nations for our lives and for our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the earth." So they made that decision that day. Let us fight against anyone who comes to attack us on the Sabbath day. Let us not all die as our kindred died in their hiding places.
Right. So Matityahu, as the Rav Rashi, as the chief rabbi, does a psak halacha and says, don't sit idle on the Shabbat. Go out and fight on the Shabbat, even if it means violating the Shabbat. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You sound like you want to say something.
No.
Okay. Onward.
All right. Then there united with them a company of Hasadeans, mighty warriors of Israel, all who offered themselves willingly for the law, and all who became fugitives to escape their troubles, joined them and reinforced them. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and renegades in their wrath. The survivors fled to the nations for safety, and Mattathias and his friends went around and tore down the altars they forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys whom they found within the borders of Israel. They hunted down the arrogant, and the work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the nations and kings, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand.
Mm-hmm. It should be pointed out that these Hasideans
Are there
is
Hasmoneans?
no, this is the Hasidim, which some people say are the antecedents of the Pharisees, although that's disputed. But let's just look at this Hasideans for a second. Okay. So just very briefly, all right, then you want to read this one right there?
Yeah, I can do that. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the Hasidians, also transcribed as Hasideans and Asideans, were a Jewish group during the Maccabean revolt that took place from around 167 to 142 BCE. The Hasideans are mentioned 3 times in the Book of the Maccabees, the main contemporary sources from the period. According to the book First Maccabees, during the early phases of the anti-Jewish decrees, and persecution proclaimed by King Antiochus IV Epiphanes, some Hasidaeans joined up with Mattathias the Hasmonean as he marshaled forces and allies for his rebellion, which was 167-166 BCE.
Mhm.
Later on, during the term of the high priest Alcimus, some Hasidaeans apparently trusted Alcimus's promises at first and attempted to negotiate a settlement with the government, but they were betrayed and executed. In the book Second Maccabees, Judas Maccabeus is described as the leader of the Hasidaeans, and of them all as troublemakers disrupting the peace, but by Alcinous, a source the book considers untrustworthy and corrupt.
Okay, let's just read one more paragraph here.
Yep. Do you mind scrolling down just a tiny bit more, please, Melech?
Think so?
That's great, thank you.
Mhm.
The Hasidaeans have been the objects of much scholarly speculation. Were they a specific group with a coherent ideology, or merely a generic term for, quote, the faithful? If they were a group, what was their religious and political stance? What happened to them after the Maccabean revolt concluded? Were they predecessors of the Pharisees or the
Okay, stop right
Portion?
there. I just want to make a quick point. So that's the common party line, that the Hasidim were the predecessors of the Pharisees. Is it true? Not necessarily at all. Okay.
Mhm. Were they the predecessors of the Pharisees, the Portion, the Essenes, or both or neither? Scholars have come to different conclusions from seeing them as religious, quote, moderates, whose main goal was the preservation of traditionalist Judaism against Hellenism, but not necessarily for establishing a separate independent political state, to seeing them as simply as a very religious group who were betrayed.
Okay, so let's see if there's anything else we want to talk about here. Maccabees. So these are primary sources about the Maccabees. Unorganized faithful, group of zealous warriors, Jewish moderates, problems of star and later influence. So 2 years later, the starring Joseph mentioned Hasmonean. Okay, so a lot to read about this, but we'll I think that's enough for now. Okay, so right. So yeah, let's start again in verse 42.
All right. Then they united with the company of Hasidaeans, mighty warriors of Israel, all who offered themselves willingly for the law, and all who became fugitives to escape their troubles, joins them and reinforced them. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and renegades in their wrath. The survivors fled to the nations for their safety, and Mattathias and his friends went round and tore down the altars. They forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys whom they found within the borders of Israel. They hunted down the arrogant, and the work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the nations and kings, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand.
Okay. So they're starting to take back Israel. This is not, by the way, when it says they tore down the altars, we're still not talking about the altar on the Temple Mount. That will come later, the conquering and rededication of the temple. This is talking about the local altars we saw earlier, that they had brought altars, or they brought idols to all of the towns around Judea, and forced people to worship those idols. Okay.
All right, the last words of Mattathias. Now, the days drew near for Mattathias to die, and he said to his sons, arrogance and scorn have now become strong. It is a time of ruin and furious anger. Now, my children, show zeal for the law, and give your lives for the covenants of our ancestors.
And indeed they will. Okay, so this is again Matnyahu, this is continuing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember the deeds of the ancestors. which they did in their generations, and you will receive great honor and everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful when tested, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness?
A reference, by the way, to Genesis chapter 18, when he argues for saving Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mhm. Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and became Lord of Egypt. Phineas, our ancestor, because he was deeply zealous, received the covenant of everlasting priesthood. Joshua, because he fulfilled the command, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified in the assembly, received an inheritance in the land.
That's
David,
referring, by the way,
because
testified in the assembly. That's referring to when Caleb would not give a bad. Caleb and Joshua would not give a bad review. They were two of the 12 spies that were sent to spy out the land of Israel, to scout out the land of Israel, and they would not come back. And so Caleb and Joshua, they testified for the good of the land of Israel, that we can conquer this land if Yahweh is with us, and that's what
this
it's referring
is
to there.
Parashat Korach.
No, not Korach. That's the spies, also in the book of.
Oh yes, sorry, I'm getting confused. Anyway,
Mhm.
let's go on. David, because he was merciful, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. Elijah, because of great zeal for the law, was taken up into heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael
Those were, by the
believed,
way, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can go on. Those
believed
were
and were
Daniel's.
saved from the flame.
Those were Daniel's buddies in Babylon.
Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of the lions.
Yep. Okay. So this is basically Netanyahu's kind of deathbed speech to his sons, right? That's what we're reading here. Just put it in context. Go
on. All right. And so observe from generation to generation that none of those who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of sinners, for their splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today they will be exalted, but tomorrow they will not be found, for they will have returned to the dust, and their plans will have perished. My children, be courageous and grow strong in the law, for by it you will gain honor. And it's really
Which
funny,
reminds me,
Mother,
by the way. Yes, go ahead.
I was just about to say,
Yeah. I'm gonna look for
thus
something to
far,
talk about.
yeah, thus far, and I'm sure it will continue for the rest of this. There is no mention of a Draj Balpeh, an oral Torah, giving of an oral Torah, obeying an oral Torah, Hatorah, the law, not the both laws, not both the written Torah, Torah Shabbat and the oral Torah, Torah Shabbat, the law. Funny that. And this is what this is dated when exactly?
The writing of the events.
Yes.
Around we're talking now. We said 178, give or take, BCE.
And this is when the Pharisees came around, wasn't it? About 170 BCE.
The Pharisees grew, not quite yet. So we mentioned the Hasidim. So this is now the period of the Hasidim. The Hasidim are, by some, considered the progenitors of the Pharisees. The Pharisees really rose to power once the Hasmonean kingdom was established. Then that's
160
when the Pharisees started. This Hasmonean kingdom was established again, I think, around 165 BCE, if I remember the date correctly. So in the period after the Hasmoneans were established, that's when the Pharisees started rising to power, and they definitely solidified their power by 63 BCE when they invited the Romans in to take over.
And it's funny because the point is up until the birth and the how would you phrase it, the switching over to the Pharisees in respect to, let's say, authority, there was no mention of an oral Torah.
Yeah, I would say even more than that. If we look carefully at the story with the Shabbat, right? So if there were an oral Torah, now the smarter rabbis like to call it, like one that I used to learn with, who remain nameless, but he's Australian and usually very, very boring. At any rate,
And likes to wear a lot of tefillin to
yeah, he wears like
shop
8 tefillin
to
when he
the
goes to the,
supermarket.
yeah, when he does his oil change on the car. So at any rate, anywho, he always he's one of the smarter ones, which makes him more dangerous. So he always says it's a development. The oral law is a development, right? But the dumber ones say that the oral law is, already goes back to Sinai, or at least the rules for figuring out the oral law, the various laws of hermeneutics go back to Sinai and were given to Moses. So if that's the case, then we see something very interesting. Shouldn't Matityahu, who was obviously a loyal, observant Jew, known about Pikuach Nefesh, known about that he should have gone out, or that the army should have gone out and fought on the Sabbath day? Okay, you could say he did know about it. That's why he tells the people to do it. But that's not what he really says here. It seems like he's making the law up based on what happened. That those other armies, or those other loyalists, had gotten attacked and killed by the Greeks by the Seleucid Greeks on the Sabbath, and then Matityahu makes a psak halacha. He makes a law which says don't do that anymore. Go out and fight on the Sabbath day. Isn't that the creation of an oral law? So if the oral law harkens back to Sinai, why is Matityahu making up this law of pikuach nefesh, which really is one of the basic laws, right? It's kind of a very basic law of Judaism, of rabbinical Judaism. Why does Matityahu have to make it up? Why does he have to do a psak halacha to say to make up this new law, seemingly, of pikuach nefesh? Of course, it's not what's happening. It has nothing to do with the oral law. Matityahu is using his common sense, which we're all supposed to do after all of these people died, by not using their common sense, by being too religious for their own good, right? And dying on Atiet Tzadik Harbe, as it says in the book of Ecclesiastics. Don't be too righteous, right? This is the consequences of being a bit too righteous. They were too righteous, and they died. They paid for it with their lives. And Matityahu says, no, this doesn't make common sense. I'm the head of the army here, and the new law for the army is you fight on the Sabbath day, right? So we have here, in a certain sense, a direct contradiction to the idea that this oral law, at least of pikuach nefesh, goes back earlier, because obviously Matityahu would have known about this. He would have already told his armies in advance. They would have known about it. They're loyalist Jews, etc. So we see the whole thing is baloney. Anyway, so where were we? What were we just?
We were. Let's fight against much later than the.
Right.
All right. Thought continue.
We were right here. Yeah, verse 61.
No, after that.
Oh no, we're after that. Right. Yeah.
Way after that.
Yeah. Here we are.
61. Here's your father. So observe. All right. So we're from 61. All right. 61 Melech.
61. You want to go back? I think we read it, but if you want to, okay.
Did we? I don't think we did.
Okay, my mistake. You're right. We didn't read it. All yours. Wait, hold on.
We got up to the lions bit, Melech. It was just after. There we are. All right. And so observe from. Did we read this? Yeah. Okay. Verse 65. Verse 65. Why 65? Is there not a 62, 63, 64?
There is. What are you talking about?
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's 61 and then 65.
I don't know what you're looking at.
Idiot boy. Never mind. I'm on a smaller screen. Sorry, I'm being a bit.
Okay.
Anyhow, all right, forget that.
Yeah.
I did a bit of a dumb moment. Small screen.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I need my reading glasses. Anyway, here's your brother Simeon.
You're 22 years old. You don't have reading glasses.
Yeah, bro.
You
do? I do. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And also, by the way, I'm like 1 second behind you. One of the ways to fix the issue with the mic is you're picking up my PC fan, so I've moved to another room. I'm on my phone.
Okay.
But I'm connected to a PC. Anyway, by the way, so
yeah,
if I'm a bit late, that's why. All right. And so observe from generation to generation that none of those who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of sinners, for their splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today they will be exalted, but tomorrow they will not be found, for they will have returned to the dust, and their plans will have perished. My children, be courageous and grow strong in the law. for by it you will gain honor.
And that reminds me of one of my favorite verses. I've always thought of this over the years. I believe
You'll
it's
be
Psalm
treasured amongst all the
31.
nations.
One second here. One second. I think it's Psalm 31. I might be wrong. Let me just see if I can find it. No, I'll just skip it. Is it 31? No, I guess it's not 31.
You know, we
19. What? 1 second, Daniel. Just give me 1 second.
I mean,
Yehuda. Just give me 1 second.
that's all right. All right. I mean, look, this is the thing, Melech. Even in Shemot, so Shemot, Exodus chapter 19, verse 5, and now, if you obey me and keep my covenants, which we know is the Torah, shall be to me a treasure out of all peoples. For mine is the earth. So, you know, that's what it reminds me of. That's that verse there. You know,
Nice.
Psalms 33, verse 4, I think might be it. For the word of the Lord is upright, and all his deeds are with faith.
That's nice too. But the one I'm specifically looking at is Psalm
19:8.
No, it's the one that says you will look at the place of the evil person, of the Rasha, and he will be no more. And I just can't remember chapter and verse offhand for some reason. I don't know.
And the lastly, I think one of my favorite verses is Tehillim, Psalms, chapter 119, verses 2 through to 6. Praiseworthy are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him wholeheartedly. Not only have they committed no injustice, they walked in his ways. You commanded your precepts to keep diligently. My prayers are that my ways should be established, to keep your statutes. Then I shall not be ashamed when I look at all of your commands.
Beautiful.
And I think that's, you know, basically from that verse we're saying, you know, if you keep the Torah on the Torah's own terms, you'll be treasured. You've done nothing wrong. You know, you've committed no injustice. Which basically, is
be loyal to God. Ultimately, good things will come out of it. Be disloyal to God. Ultimately, things are not going to go well for you. When that ultimately means, who knows? It's in his hands. But that's stay the course, stay loyal. As we see that Matityahu and his sons are doing, and his followers. Okay, let's go on to verse 65. Let's throw it out to the audience. We'll get to the end of chapter 2, and then we can take a quick break to throw it out to the audience. So go ahead.
Here is your brother Simeon, who I know is wise in his counsel. Always listen to him. He shall be your father. Judas Maccabees has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battle against the peoples. You shall rally around you all who observe the law and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the nations in full and obey the commands of the law.
Yep. So this is his, what we would call in Hebrew, tziva'ah. This is his will, his deathbed. We see it so many times. We see it, for instance, with Jacob when he gives the deathbed blessing in Genesis chapter 48 to his sons. We see it, I can't think of other instances offhand, but we see it many Isaac when he gives the blessing to Jacob instead of to Esau, right? So this is very typical that this is kind of Matityahu knows he's going to die, and he gives his final kind of deathbed or nearing end of life speech, and will, not in terms of handing over the money, but in terms of what should happen after him, just as we saw Alexander did when he was about to die, that he said that his generals should take over the kingdom. Okay.
Then he blessed them and was gathered to his ancestors. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tomb of his ancestors at Modi'in, and all Israel mourned for him. with great lamentation.
Right. So a year after the original event, it said that was in year 145. This is 146. 145 was when he slaughtered the Jew and the who was worshiping the idol, and the officer and the Greek officer. Right. So a year later he dies, and basically, what is he saying? He's saying Shimon is now in charge, and Judah Maccabee is now head of the army. Right.
Mhm.
And so we go back to the beginning. Okay. The son of John, son of Shimon. He had 5 sons. Right. Okay. So Shimon. So usually sons are listed in the Tanakh. When you have a listing of sons, then they're usually done from the eldest to the youngest. And so we see that Shimon is now in charge, is the second eldest, probably. And Judah Yehuda Maccabee is the third eldest. Okay. And that ends chapter 2. Let's turn it over to the audience and see if there are any questions. Anybody have any questions or comments out there in the audience? We've been going at it for 2 hours, so if you're good, we can go at it for a while longer, another hour or so, maybe.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right, so we're going to go on to chapter 3. Let's find chapter 3. I think I just type in chapter 3. By the way, I know it's a bit early. We haven't gotten to the actual story of the rededication of the temple, but notice nothing even alluding to some kind of oil miracle or anything like that, and there will not be any allusions to any kind of ridiculous oil miracle made up completely by the rabbis. Okay.
Mhm.
Verse 3.
All right. The early victories of Judas. Then his son Judas was called Maccabeus, took command in his place. All his brothers and all who had joined his father helped them. They gladly fought for Israel. He extended the glory of his people.
So
Like a
again,
giant, he put on his.
Again, just to point out, this is a poem, right? Whenever you
Mhm.
see it like that, written in verse, this is a poem. So go ahead.
He extended the glory of his people. Oh, do you mind scrolling up a little bit, Melech, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Like a giant, he put on his breastplate. He bound on his armor of war and waged battles, protecting the camp by his sword. He was like a lion in his deeds, like a lion's cub roaring for prey. He searched out and pursued those who broke the law.
A reference, by the way, probably to the blessing given by Yaakov, by Jacob to Judah. His name is Judah. Maybe that's the connection. But this is like the blessing given to Judah in again at the end of the book of Genesis, where he says you're like a lion, a lion's cub, the cub of a lion. Paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly what word. Who shall rouse him? So I think this is direct reference back to that. Go on.
He was like a lion in his deeds, like a lion's cub roaring for prey. He searched out and pursued those who broke the law. He burned those who troubled his people. Lawbreakers shrank back for fear of him. All the evildoers were confounded, and deliverance prospered by his hand. He embittered many kings, but he made Jacob glad by his deeds. And his. Do you mind clicking off, please, Melech?
Yeah.
Thank you. He embittered many kings, but he made Jacob glad by his deeds, and his memory is blessed forever. He went through the cities of Judah. He destroyed the ungodly out of the land. Thus he turned away wrath from Israel. He was renowned to the ends of the earth. He gathered in those who were perishing.
Okay, so this is a poem to Yehuda Maccabee, right? That's basically what these verses are. Okay. Okay. Then Apollonius. So who's Apollonius? Let's just backtrack a bit here.
Then Apollonius gathered. Oh, never mind.
1 second. Let's find out who this Apollonius is. Oh, wrong Apollonius. Is there a disambiguation somewhere? No, there's a bunch of Apolloniuses. He's a Greek, one of the generals of Antiochus. That's all. Okay, go ahead.
Oh. 1 second.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
Right. Okay. All right. Then Apollonius gathered together nations and a large force from Samaria to fight against Israel. When Judas learned of it, he went out to meet him, and he defeated and killed him. Many were wounded and fell, and the rest fled. Then they seized their spoils, and Judas took the sword of Apollonius and used it in battle the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm. So these are different generals that now are going out to battle against the Israelites, against the Maccabees, we can call them maybe already, or against the army of Judah the Maccabee, and getting defeated.
When Saron, the commander of the Syrian army, heard that Judas had gathered a large company, including a body of faithful soldiers who stayed with him and went out to battle, he said, "I will make a name for myself and win honor in the kingdom. I will make the war on Judas and his companions, who scorn the king's command." Once again, a strong army of godless men joined
There
him.
we're talking about Hellenized Jews once again. Okay, that's what that refers to.
And went up with him to help him to take vengeance on the Israelites.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Remember, I'm a couple of seconds behind you video-wise.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
There we are. When he approached the ascent of Beth Horon, Judas went out to meet him with a small company. But when they saw the army coming to them, they said to Judas, "How can we, few as we are, fight against so great and so strong a multitude? And we are faint, for we have not eaten nothing today." Judas replied, "It is easy for many to be hemmed in by few, for in the sight of heaven there is no difference between saving many or by few. It is not on the size of the army that victory in battle depends, but strength comes from heaven."
Which is exactly, by the way, the reason that we're not allowed to do a census. We're not allowed to, it is forbidden for us to do a census, except when it's directly commanded by Yahweh, of the Israelite people. Because by doing so, we're trying to figure out how many people we have to go out to battle, and battle doesn't depend on the number, it doesn't depend on quality, it depends on quantity, and it doesn't depend on quantity, it depends on quality, and quality is defined by loyalty to Yahweh. It also reminds us of Gidon in the book of Judges, who was told by Yahweh to whittle his army down to 300, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we see this common refrain.
They came against us in great insolence and lawlessness to destroy us, and our wives and our children, and to despoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws. He himself will crush them before us. As for you, do not be afraid of them.
Mm-hmm. And this is Judah speaking, right?
Yeah.
Judah Maccabee.
When he finished speaking, he rushed suddenly against Saron and his army, and they were crushed before him. They pursued them down the descent of Beth Horon to the plain. 800 of them fell, and the rest fled into the land of the Philistines. Then Judas and his brothers began to be feared, and terror fell on the nations all around them. His fame reached the king, and the nations talked of the battles of Judas.
Mm-hmm.
When King Antiochus heard these reports, he was greatly angered, and he sent and gathered all the forces of his kingdom, a very strong army. He opened his coffers and gave a year's pay to all his forces and ordered them to be ready for any need. Then he saw that the money in the treasury was exhausted, and that the tribute payments from the country were small because of the dissension and disaster that he had caused in the land by abolishing the laws that had existed from the earliest days. He feared that he might not have such funds as he had before for his expenses and for gifts that he used to give more lavishly than preceding kings.
And by
He
the
was
way, he was
greatly
known. This Antiochus was known for giving lavish gifts.
Mhm.
Not.
He was great.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He was greatly perplexed in mind. Then he had determined to go to Persia and collect the tribute payments from from those regions and raise a large fund.
Right. So homeboy's running out of money,
Basically, yeah.
basically.
As we would say here, bro is skint.
I never heard that expression, but I don't.
Skint, yeah. If you skint, you've got no money. Yeah.
Skim,
Strip for cash.
skim, S-K-I-M.
Skint, S-K-I-N-T. Skint.
Skint?
That means
Okay.
you've got no money.
All right, never heard that one before.
Yeah, it's not to be confused with another word, but I won't say that word on a live stream. Anyway, all right. Yeah, bro is skint. He has no money. All right. He left Lysias. Lysias?
Lysias,
All right.
yes.
Lysias, a distinguished man of royal lineage, in charge of the king's affairs from the river Euphrates to the borders of Egypt. Lysias was also to take care of his son Antiochus until he returned. And he turned over to Lysias half of his forces and the elephants and gave him orders about all that he wanted done. Excuse me.
Mhm.
As for the residents of Judea and Jerusalem, Lysias was to send a force against them to wipe out and destroy the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem. He was to banish the memory of them from the place, settle strangers in all their territory, and distribute their land by lot. Then the king took the remaining half of his forces and left Antioch, his capital, in the 147th year. He crossed the Euphrates River and went through the upper provinces.
So Antiochus takes half the army, goes out on a money collection campaign, and leaves Lysias behind to take care of the affairs, including finishing off Israel. We'll see what happens.
Preparations for battle. All right. Lysias chose Ptolemy, son of Dorymanes, and Nicanor and Gorgias, able men among the friends of the king, and sent with them 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry to go into the land of Judah and destroy it, as the king had commanded. So they set out with their entire force, and when they arrived, they encamped near Emos
Whatever.
in the
Who knows? Mhm.
in the plain.
Mhm.
When the traders of the region heard what was said to them, they took silver and gold in immense amounts of fetters, and went to the camp to get the Israelites for slaves. And forces from Syria and the land of the Philistines joined with them.
So we have a big army now, right? Under
Mhm.
these three generals, Ptolemy, Dorymanes, and Nicanor. Keep an eye on this Nicanor. He's going to play a kind of major role. And then we see the Philistines joined with this army, and they're all out to finish off the Israelites, finish off the Judeans once and for all. Okay.
All right. Now Judas and his brothers saw that his misfortunes had increased, and that the forces were encamped in their territory. They also learned what the king had commanded to do to the people to cause their final destruction. I mean, we've heard that phrase before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Final, yeah. But they said to one another, "Let us restore the ruins of our people and fight for our people and the sanctuary." So the congregation assembled to be ready for battle and to pray and ask for mercy and compassion.
So this is I remember when I was learning in a certain whatchamacallit, Dati Leumi,
Yeshiva.
religious Zionist yeshiva, and they'd always point to this idea that this is what the Maccabees did. On the one hand, they prayed, and on the one hand, they prepared for battle. So they always like to talk about it as a Tanakh in one hand and a sword in the other. In fact, when they I did a video, a short, maybe 2 months ago already, about a swearing-in ceremony. When they swear in the new recruits to the IDF after they're done with basic training, they do an official swearing-in ceremony, and it's held at the Kotel in Jerusalem. And the two things they give each soldier is a rifle and a Tanakh. I don't know if the soldiers ever read the Tanakh, but they give it to them.
Well, what about the non-Jewish ones? Non-Jewish.
Everybody gets a rifle and a Tanakh.
Oh, really? Oh, right. Okay.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
As so it should be. Right. Anyway, Jerusalem was uninhabited like a wilderness. Not one of her children went in or out. The sanctuary was trampled down, and strangers held the citadel. It was a lodging place for the nations. Joy was taken from Jacob, the flute and the harp ceased to play.
Mm-hmm. Poem, right? Poetic.
Then they had gathered together and went to Mizpah, opposite Jerusalem, because Israel formerly had a place of prayer in Mizpah.
And this mitzvah is mentioned in the Torah. We won't get into it right now. Go on.
They fasted that day, put on sackcloth, and sprinkled ashes on their heads, and tore their clothes. And they opened the book of the law.
Yep.
To inquire into those matters, funny that, about which the nations consulted the likeness of their gods.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't they go to the Talmud? Why didn't they go to the Tanya? Why didn't they go to
the oral law?
There?
Why didn't they go to their Rebbe and ask him a question? Shelat Rabbi. Right? Absolutely. They opened the book of the law. Very good, Daniel. I like.
So,
I mean,
yes, I always point out. I mean, all throughout Tanakh, they consulted Sefer Torah.
Right. Yeah. Why didn't they go to the yeshiva and learn Gemara with the Toys?
Yeah.
They opened the book of the law. Absolutely.
Oh, they had Shulchan Aruch, and they opened anyway. But yeah, I think I always love to point this out. And by the way, do you know what the oldest manuscript is?
The oldest manuscript in history?
Of what is this First Maccabees? Yeah.
It's in the Septuagint. So whatever the oldest Septuagint.
Well, there you are. There you are. So this is nothing new, all right? And this was what before the birth of the Pharisees as an identifiable movement.
Absolutely.
So, there you are. In such a manuscript, no mention of an oral Torah.
No, nowhere.
Funny. Anyway, and they opened the book of the law to inquire into those.
Since you're so into these particular types of verses, you should assemble
I have.
Okay. Add this to your list.
I'll have to send you it. Anyway.
No, I'm saying you should add this verse to your list.
Yes, I'm going to screenshot this actually. There we are. Great. All right, fabulous. I've got it. That's really interesting. All right, this is interesting now. All right, They also brought the vestments of the priesthood and the first fruits and the tithes. And they stirred up the Nazarites who had completed their days. And they cried out to heaven, saying, before I continue, there was no place called Nazareth at this time, right?
No,
Was
the
there?
Nazarites. That's
Yes, I was.
that's
And
This is not-
no, exactly. Okay, but Melech, this is my point. Just in case anybody says, "Oh, Nazareth," or connection to Yoshka, or whoever.
oh,
No, this is not the Nazir
Right.
are a specific group of people
or as
who you
people
take
who
the
take
Nazarite vow.
specific oath. Exactly. This is not referring
Yes.
to this.
So they don't cut their hair, they don't drink alcohol, they don't go near the dead, things like that, right? Before anybody thinks, Nazareth, or this is in connection to Jesus. Blah, blah, blah.
Usually, if they're going to translate someone from Nazareth into English, they won't translate as Nazarite. They'll translate as a Nazarene.
Yes. All right. But not
Also,
everybody
we see
might know
this
that, I
is
suppose.
lowercase rather than uppercase. So,
Yes.
but good for
But
pointing that out. No,
for
this
those
is not
who
referring-
might see this after when it's uploaded before they get
Right.
confused,
Good.
I think it was an important thing to bring up. All right. What shall we do with these? Where shall we take them? Your sanctuary is trampled down and profaned, and your priests mourn in humiliation. Here the nations are assembled against us to destroy us. You know what they plot against us. How will we be able to withstand them if you do not help us?
So let's just get a little bit of. So they gathered at Mitzvah, which is again mentioned in the Torah, and they looked into the book, into the Torah, and then they brought out the priestly garments, right? The 1st fruits and the tithes, okay? And they said, "What are we going to do with these? We have no temple, right? We have so, for instance, the vestments of the priesthood, right? What purpose do the priestly garments have if there's no temple? The priest is supposed to serve in the temple, and the first fruits and the tithes. Some of them are brought, all the first fruits, and some of the tithes are brought to the temple, right? So they're saying, what do you want from us, Yahweh? What do you want from us, God? We have no temple, and what are we supposed to do with these things? They're meaningless right now. These priestly garments, these first fruits, these tithes. How can the Nazarites break their vow? Right? They'd completed their days. In other words, they want to break their vow. But as it says in the book of Numbers, I believe it's chapter 6, where it deals with the Nazarites, if I'm not mistaken, then they have to go up to the temple and they have to bring a sacrifice in order to break their vow. And they can't break their vow. There's no temple. That's context of what they're saying here in this verse, in these verses. Okay? Right? What should we do with them? What are we going to do with the priestly garments, with the Nazarites who've completed their days and want to break their vow, with these first fruits, these tithes? Okay, your sanctuary is trampled down and profaned, and your priests mourn in humiliation. So they're bringing out these things and say, look at the shame, look at the situation we're in, right? We can't do anything with these. Woe is us, right?
All right. Then they sounded the trumpets and gave a loud shouts. After this, Judas appointed leaders of the people in charge of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens. Those who were building houses, or were about to be married, or they were planting a vineyard, or were faint-hearted. He told to go home.
So this is straight out of according to the law. This is straight out of the Torah, right?
Yes.
Straight out of the Torah, where before you go out to battle, then you say, is there anyone who has built a house and has not yet lived in it? Is there anyone who is betrothed a woman and who has not married her? Is there anyone who has planted a vineyard and has not reaped from it? Is there anyone who is scared and whose heart is faint and will melt the hearts of the other people? If so, please exclude yourselves from the army right now. So this is, again, reading straight out of the written law.
Then the army marched out and encamped to the south of Emos.
And by the way, we have the trumpets being sounded. So this is all straight out of the Torah, right? When you go out to battle, you sound the silver trumpets. You do it teruah on the silver trumpets. Teruah is meant to be like a warning, like a crying out to heaven to help us. Okay, you go out and you sound the silver trumpets. I have a good friend named David Perkins. He's back in the United States of America right now, but this is like his area of expertise. And he's in fact made silver trumpets, and he wanted to have them sent to Israel during the war. I don't know if he ever did in the end. I should speak to him. But this is straight out of the Torah, appointing leaders, right? Heads of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens is again straight out of the Torah, making this phrase, saying this phrase. The Kohen is supposed to announce to the people, right? Anyone who these various things, exclude yourself from the army. So this is again straight out of the written law. They're hearkening back to the Torah on the Torah, the way the Torah tells us. The written Torah tells us to prepare yourself for war and to assemble an army to go out against your enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oops.
All right. And Judas said, "Arm yourselves and be courageous. Be ready early in the morning to fight with these nations who have assembled against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. It is better for us to die in battle than to see the misfortunes of our nation and of the sanctuary. But as his will in heaven may be, so shall he do."
Very nice. And yeah, so this is going to be the big battle, right?
Mm.
They're ready for the big battle here. Is basically the idea. All right, are we up for going on another chapter or so?
Yeah, I can. Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
First Maccabees chapter 4.
Mm-hmm. Just 1 second. I'm just going to check in here.
Not a bother.
All right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Go for it, Daniel.
All right. Well, I will in 1 second whilst it clip back. All right. Brilliant. No, Georgius took 5,000 infantry and 1,000 picked up cavalry, and this division moved out by night to fall upon the camp of the Jews and attack them suddenly. Men from the citadel were his guides, but Judas heard of it, and he and his warriors moved out to attack the king's forces in Emos, while the division was still absent from the camp. When Georgius entered the camp of Judas by night, he found no one there. So he looked for them in the hills, because he said, "These men are running away from us."
Mm-hmm.
Scroll down. All right, brilliant. At daybreak, Judas appeared in the plain with 3,000 men, but they did not have armor and swords such as they desired. And they saw the camp of the nations strong and fortified, with cavalry all around it. And these men were trained in war. But Judas said to those who were with him, "Do not fear their numbers, or be afraid when they charge. Remember how our ancestors were saved at the Red Sea, when Pharaoh with his forces pursued them. And now let us cry to heaven to see whether he will favor us, and remember his covenants with our ancestors, and crush this army before us today. Then all the nations will know that there is no one who redeems and saves."
There is one. There is one.
Oh, sorry, there is one. Yes. Oh, God.
Correcting the Baal Koreh.
Yes, thank you. Then all the nations will know that there is one. There is one who redeems and saves Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Most certainly there is.
Yep.
When the foreigners looked up and saw them coming against them, they went out from their camp to battle. Then the men with Judas blew their trumpets and engaged in battle. The nations were crushed and fled into the plain, and all those who in the rear fell by the sword. They pursued them to Gazara and to the plains of Idumea, and to the Azotus and Jamnia.
Jamnia is Yavne, by the way.
Yamnia, okay. Oh, yes, because J in Greek is yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm. And Idumea is the land of the Edomites, the Idumeans, who were later, by the way, forced converted into Judaism later in the Hasmonean Kingdom, and that's out in basically southern Jordan, northern Saudi Arabia area.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they fled in all different directions.
Mhm.
from the
I
coast.
believe, don't quote me, I believe that's the only time where Jews have ever force converted people.
I guess you could say that. Maybe you could speak about the Gibeonites, the Givonim in Joshua. They weren't force converted, but they tricked Joshua into accepting them as part of the nation of Israel. They looked
Right.
like they'd come from far away. So yeah,
But
I
is
mean,
that really conversion, though? That's the point.
it's not forced conversion, but it's mass conversion. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
And 3,000 of them fell.
Mhm.
Then Judas and his force turned back from pursuing them, and he said to the people, "Do not be greedy for plunder, for there is a battle before us. Gorgias and his horse, and it was in the hills. But now stand against our enemies and fight them, and afterward seize the plunder boldly." All right. Just as Judas was finishing this speech, a detachment appeared coming out of the hills. They saw that their army had been put to fight and that the Jews were burning the camp, for the smoke that was seen showed what had happened. When they perceived this, they were greatly frightened, and when they also saw the army of Judas drawn up in the plain for battle, they all fled in the land of the Philistines. Then Judas returned to plunder the camp, and they seized a great amount of gold and silver, and cloth dyed blue, and sea
Mhm.
purple, and green,
Stop right there. Very
great
interesting. I'll talk about that in a second.
tcheles.
Talk about that in a
Mhm.
second. Yeah. Hmm.
I'll finish this last line. Great
Mhm.
riches. On their return, they sang hymns and praises to heaven. For he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Kili Elam Kastor, right? Thus
Mhm.
Israel had a great deliverance that day.
Hmm. Let me just point out something. It's very interesting. Again, this is translated from the Greek, but here it's translated as sea purple. So that is a clear reference to what's called Tyrian purple or Phoenician purple, which is
Yeah.
made from the Murex trunculus, or renamed the
Mhm.
Hexaplex trunculus, from that sea snail. That the
Which is what they say
rabbis
Tchelet is.
exactly. Now notice it doesn't say here sea blue or something like that. It says
Blue
dyed blue.
violet. Mhm.
It
Or
says
it doesn't
dyed
say
blue.
blue violet or sea blue
No,
violet.
no, which
Hmm.
kind of implies it's maybe an implication or an allusion to the fact that they did not make the techelet from the Murex trunculus, because it would say something like
Hmm.
sea blue and sea purple, or sea blue and purple, right? It says dyed blue and sea purple.
Yeah.
Something interesting to point out. In fact, I should
Mhm.
remember this verse.
We'll have to do a video on Tchelet. We'll have to
Oh, that's
what me and you, what myself and you and I, sorry, background, talked about the
mm-hmm,
other day. I think we need to do a video of that. That would be interesting. Go through
mm-hmm,
everything that we looked at.
mm-hmm.
And look at the sources. Well, I'll talk to you outside
Sure.
of this about
Mm-hmm.
that. Anyway,
You know, I just want to take a note of this verse for 1 second.
yes.
Just give me 1 second here. Let's see where I'm going to put it. I'll just leave it right here. Okay. And this is in chapter, what are we in, chapter 4 already? Yeah.
Yeah, chapter 4.
4, verse 23. 1 second. Okay. I'll deal with that later. Okay. All right. So first campaign. See, it gets very kind of technical now. Oh, but here we go. The cleansing and dedication of the temple. So we're up to the good stuff. So let's keep on going. We're almost there. Okay.
Brilliant. Well,
So basically, they defeat this one general, Gorgias, right, and his armies, and burn the camp, even though they had less weaponry than his army. Okay. First campaign of Lysias. Remember, Lysias was the guy that Antiochus left in charge while he went out, on a begging campaign. Well, not really a begging campaign, more like a give me your money campaign. Where else?
Those of the foreigners who escaped went and reported to Lysias all that had happened. When he heard it, he was perplexed and discouraged, for things had not happened to Israel as he had intended, nor had they turned out as the king had ordered. But the next year he mustered 60,000 picked infantry and 5,000 cavalry to subdue them. They came into the Idumea and encamped at Bethazor, and Judas met them with 10,000 men.
Sorry.
I'll read up
drinking water.
into.
Yep.
All right,
Yeah. I'll let me move down here. Hold on a second.
that's all right.
Regarding his production, I missed it. I'm just gonna read for myself. But things did not happen to Israel as he intended. But the next year he mustered 60. So now he comes back with 60,000, with 5,000 cavalry. And okay, so here we go. They're going for another attempt at the Israelites.
When he saw that their army was strong, he prayed, saying, Blessed are you, O Saviour of Israel, who crushed the attack of the mighty warrior by the hand of your servant David, and gave the camp of the Philistines into the hands of Jonathan, son of Saul, and of the man who carried his armor. Hem in this army by the hand of your people Israel, and let them be ashamed of their troops and their cavalry. Fill them with cowardice, melt the boldness of their strength. Let them tremble in their destruction. Strike them down with the sword of those who love you, and let all who know your name praise you with hymns.
So he praised the Yahweh.
Then both sides attacked, and there fell of the army of Lysias 5,000 men. They fell before them. When Lysias saw the rout of his troops and observed the boldness that inspired those of Judas, and how ready they were to live or to die nobly, he withdrew to Antioch and enlisted mercenaries in order to invade Judea again, even with a larger army.
Antioch is in Syria, by the way. Let's see exactly where Antioch is.
All right. Then Judas and his brothers said,
Just 1 second.
Didn't say.
1 second.
All right.
So there's Antioch. Where to go? Antioch. So is that Syria, Aleppo? Oh, so it's actually in. It looks like it's right in. No, it's in Syria. Right there. So right on the Syrian border with Turkey. Okay. Okay. All right.
Great. Where were we? There we are. All right. Then Judas and his brothers said, See, our enemies are crushed. Let us go up to cleanse the sanctuary and dedicate it. So all the army assembled and went up to Mount Zion. There they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profaned, and the gates burned. In the courts they saw bushes sprung up, as in a thicket or as one of the mountains. They saw also the chambers of the priests in ruins. Then they tore their clothes and mourned with great lamentation. They sprinkled themselves with ashes and fell face down on the ground. And they blew the signal trumpets, and they cried out to heaven.
So here we have the cleansing of the sanctuary. So this is Hanukkah. This is it. This is the story. Now let's pay attention. Is there an oil miracle mentioned anywhere here? Let's find out.
Then Judas detailed men to fight against those in the citadel, until he had cleansed the sanctuary. He chose blameless priests devoted to the law, and they cleansed the sanctuary and removed the defiled stones to an unclean place. They deliberated what to do about the altar of burnt offering, which had been profaned, and they did it and they thought it best to tear it down, so that it would not be a lasting shame to them, that the nations had defiled it. So they tore down the altar and stored the stones in a convenient place on the temple hill until a prophet should come down to tell them what to do.
Interesting situation, right? It reminds me of in the book of, is it Ezra? Is it Nehemiah? Hold on a second. I believe it's both Ezra and Nehemiah. It speaks about how the some of the Levites cannot prove their lineage, and so they excluded them, or Kohanim could not prove their lineage, so they excluded them from the priesthood until should come a time when a priest with the Urim and Tumim could determine whether their lineage was actually of the priestly class or not. So same idea here, right? They don't know what to do with this, so they're going to wait for God to basically tell them what to do, right?
All right, well,
47.
Then not to tell them what to do with them. Then they took unhewn stones as the law directs and built a new altar like the former one.
Again, straight out of the Torah, that when you build the altar, you have to build it with unhewn stones. No axe, no chiseling tool is allowed to be wielded against the stones of the altar.
They also rebuilt that's very interesting, actually. They also rebuilt the sanctuary in the interior of the temple and consecrated the courts. They made new holy vessels and brought the lampstand, the altar of incense, and the table into the temple. Then they offered incense on the altar and lit the lamps on the lampstand. And these gave light in the temple. They placed
so pay attention here. So this is now the rededication. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Lit the lamps on the lampstand. Okay. And these gave light in the temple. So this is the menorah, right?
This is the menorah in the area called the Kodesh. The inner sanctuary, not the inner sanctuary where the Ark of the Covenant would be placed. It's no longer there, but the inner sanctuary. This is just talking about restoring the regular things that have always been in the temple.
By the
way, if I could point out, I'll just read that last verse since they placed the bread on the table and hung up the curtains. They finished all the work they had undertaken, right? So notice here that they lit the lampstand, they lit the menorah, not right? It doesn't say anything about one vat of oil being found, them running out of oil, and a miraculous thing occurred for 8 days. They had oil and they lit the menorah with it. That's all it says here. Right? If anything, if that were the case, this is where the so-called Hanukkah miracle should be inserted. No mention of it whatsoever, and there will be no mention of it. Not here, not in Second Maccabees. The two primary or almost primary sources of the events. Right? Okay. So.
All right. Okay. All right. Early in the morning of the 25th day of the 9th month. So this is Kislev, isn't it?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Which is the month of Kislev. In the 148th year. They rose and offered sacrifice as the Lord directs, on the new altar of burnt offering they had built, at the very season and on the very day that the nations had profaned it. It was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals.
Okay, stop. Remember we said that in, I believe it was Maccabees chapter 1, so let's just go back there for a second, right? That the defilement of the temple had occurred on the 25th day of Kislev. Right? Let's find that for a second. So the Jews, the Maccabees and their followers are deliberately choosing this day for the day of rededication of the temple. Let's even find this here. Let's See, there we go. Here, it's First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 59. On the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice on the altar that was on the top of the on top of the altar of burnt offering. Okay, so this is when they started offering sacrifices. They defiled the temple and they started offering sacrifices to foreign gods on the temple on the 25th day of Kislev. Okay. And this was in which year? This was in the 145th year. Now we're talking about the 148th year on the same day, the 25th of Kislev. Okay, so where are we? 25th Kislev, there. Okay, on the 148th year. So exactly 3 years after the office of Antiochus had started worship, or started doing foreign sacrifices to foreign gods on the altar. They cleansed the temple and rededicated it, offered sacrifices once again, restored the temple and offered sacrifices once again to Yahweh on the same day. So this 25th day of the 9th month, this 25th day of Kislev, has significance, right? They specifically chose this day because that's 3 years exactly to the day on the Jewish calendar after the Seleucid Greeks had started offering sacrifices to foreign gods on the altar. Right? And it says right there.
Early in the morning of the 25th day of the 9th month, which is the month Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose and offered sacrifice as the Lord directs, on the new altar of burnt offering they had built. At the very season and on the very day that all the nations had profaned it, it was dedicated with songs and harps and lutes and cymbals.
Yep.
All the people fell on their faces and worshipped and blessed heaven. So that means to prostrate, right? Who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings.
Yep, I'm just going to point out they celebrated
So they
for how long?
the dedication of the altar for 8 days.
There's our 8 days of Hanukkah,
Yeah.
but no oil miracle, right?
Does it explain why it was celebrated for 8 days?
Yes, I'll get to that one second. Just to finish off the verse.
All right.
Let's talk about that in a second.
Who had prospered them. So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings. They offered a sacrifice of well-being and the thanksgiving offering. They dedicated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers for the priests and fitted them with doors. There was very great joy among the people, and the disgrace brought by the nations was removed.
And now we hear the establishment of the holiday of Hanukkah.
Then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determines that every year at the season of the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days, beginning with the 25th day of the month of Kislev.
Let's just finish off the chapter and then we'll get back to these points.
Yeah. At that time, they fortified Mount Zion with high walls and strong towers all around to keep the nations from coming and trampling them, as they had done before. Judas stationed a garrison there to guard it. He also fortified Beth Zor to guard it, so that the people might have a stronghold that faced Idumea.
Okay. So let's answer the question here. Should we as Karaites keep Hanukkah? In my opinion, yes. Is it on the same level as keeping a biblical holiday? Absolutely not. Is it even on the same level as keeping Purim? Maybe not, because Purim is part of the canon of the Tanakh. This is the Book of Maccabees, but still, it's kind of the same setup. If we were to go through the book of Esther, chapter 9, and maybe I'll just look at it very briefly in the English just to make the point, we see that this is exactly how the holiday of Purim was set up. It was set up through basically Mordecai and Esther essentially making the people take an oath that they will keep the holiday from year to year. And that's essentially what Judah Maccabee is doing right here. He's joining Israel to remember this event and to dedicate it each year for 8 days. However, does it say anything about lighting a Hanukkah menorah for 8 days? No. It says that the days of the dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days. That's all it says. It should just be a happy holiday. Okay? So should we as Karaites light the Hanukkah menorah? No, there's no implication that we should light the Hanukkah menorah. Okay? Do I like the Hanukkah menorah? I grew up, as I mentioned to you earlier, Yehuda, I grew up rabbinically Jewish. It's very nostalgic for me to light the Hanukkah menorah. I don't say the blessing when I do it, but yes, I do like the Hanukkah menorah just because I grew up with my mom and dad and family lighting the Hanukkah menorah. It's extremely nostalgic.
So we wouldn't say, you know, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who's commanded us to light the Hanukkah candles, because he hasn't.
Correct.
All right, so we wouldn't do that. But second of all, would it be a seven-branch menorah?
There are 3 blessings. There are 3 blessings that are said on.
Yes, of course. But
by
that's
the rabbis,
the
right?
We'll
talk about all 3 of them, right? So the first one is, as you said, let's say it and translate it and ask whether we should say it at all, right? So Baruch atah
Hashem
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu
b'mitzvotav
That's the first one. Let's translate it. Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, God, King of the universe. Who has sanctified us with his commandments, and commanded us and commanded us to light the Hanukkah candles. Okay, so this clearly Yahweh did not command us to light the Hanukkah candles. So I will never ever say it. Now again, out of nostalgia, I grew up singing that. As you may have noticed, I grew up singing that blessing, so I will sing it, but I'll always leave out the word Vitzivanu. So personally, what I do, I'm not saying anyone else should do it, but I grew up in a rabbinically Jewish home, not Orthodox, but conservative Jewish, and it's very nostalgic to me. So I will sing. I'll sing it when I light the Hanukkah candle. I'll sing Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, and I'll leave out the word Vitzivanu, and I'll just say That's just my way of melding the nostalgia with absolutely not wanting to say that God has commanded us to keep to light the Hanukkah candles, because that would be adding to the Torah clearly, right?
Yes.
The rabbis want to say that they can make when they make the law to light the Hanukkah candles, that's actually coming from God, because essentially they believe that they are the representatives of God, and any law they make is essentially by extension a law that God has made.
And also, to me, Melech, it doesn't make any sense to light the menorah, because the menorah is strictly a temple practice anyway.
Right. Well, it's not technically a menorah. The menorah in the temple has 7
prongs.
Well,
sure. Hanukkah is based off the menorah.
Yeah, of course it's based on that off the menorah, but I'll talk about that in a second. Okay. Again, that's right. It doesn't say here. Even Judah Maccabee did not enjoin Israel to light the Hanukkah menorah. It doesn't say that anywhere here. It just says what does Judah the Maccabee say? Should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days. That's all it says. Should be 8 days of happiness, 8 days of celebration, 8 days of happiness, parties, meals, getting together. Again, if we compare it to Esther chapter 9, we would see similar things there. Okay. By the way, the second blessing that's usually said is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavoteinu bayamim hahem ba'zman hazeh, which means, and this one I will sing out completely again, just for nostalgic reason. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that Karaites have to or should or need to say this, but I just do it for nostalgia. I'm going up with it. So that means, again, blessed are you, Adonai, King of the universe, she'asa nisim lavotenu, who did miracles for our forefathers, she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem, in those days at that time, Ba'azman hazeh, in those days at the time. So that one I will say, because there's nothing blasphemous about that, right? And then the third one that's usually said on the first days of the Shechianu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Shechianu v'higianu I'm sorry, Shechianu v'kiddishanu v'higianu la'azman hazeh. And that's what you say when something starts. That one I usually just skip because it doesn't add anything to it. So again, I'm not saying, so what should we do as Karaites? I believe we should celebrate Hanukkah. I believe that we should celebrate it for 8 days. I don't believe we need to light a Hanukkah menorah, although I do light a Hanukkah menorah, again, for nostalgic reasons, because that's what I grew up doing with my family. And but you don't have to. And that's it. I believe that, yes, we should, because Judah HaMaccabee asked the people of Israel throughout the generations to remember these 8 days, remember the dedication of the temple, and celebrate them what? With joy and gladness, which basically means, again, having communal meals, giving gifts to each other, giving gifts to the poor, as we can see in the book of Esther, chapter 9, and just having, remembering that these are happy days, that these are happy times. Okay, so that's my answer to that question. Yes, as Karaites, we should keep the holiday of Hanukkah. Okay, in this way though, and again, all the things that I add, in other words, kind of saying the blessings without adding anything blasphemous, lighting the Hanukkah, the Hanukkah menorah, I do purely out of nostalgic reasons, having grown up doing that with my family. Okay,
but is that perfectly valid? Is it proper if you were to light the Hanukkah as a Karaite or Tanach?
I mean, probably not, but I'm a human being.
No, I wouldn't think so. That's what I thought as well. Well, no, I might check out questions like this because people.
But there's nothing explicitly wrong with it. There's nothing explicitly wrong with it except for the fact that the rabbis instituted it and said you have to do it, right?
Sure, so, that's the point. What happens if somebody wanted to and didn't say the bracha as per usual? Would that be in line, or would you not recommend it as a Karaite Hakham?
I would say it's totally fine. I would say it's totally fine as long as you don't say that the full first bracha, or don't say any of the brachas at all. If you want to just say your own prayer from the heart and say and thank Yahweh for bringing the victory of the Maccabees against the army of Lysias and cleaning out the Temple Mount, then that's fine. If you want to say the blessings like I do for nostalgic reasons, but leave out that word vitzivanu, that's my way of dealing with it. Everyone in their own way. What we don't want to do is say that God commanded us to light the Hanukkah menorah, because that's obviously a bunch of BS. Okay, but again, it's certainly not required to say any of the blessings. That goes without saying, and it's certainly not required to celebrate by lighting the Hanukkah. Again, I do it for nostalgic reasons, and I would say that anyone else who did it for nostalgic reasons, or to be, I guess, together with the rest of the nation that's doing it, it's totally fine. Another question that comes up is, should we do it on the 25th month of the 25th day of the 9th month according to the biblical calendar, or according to the rabbinical calendar? Because it's going to be different, right? In fact, this month, I think it's 1 day apart or something like that. The fact of the matter is, I just do it on the rabbinical calendar for the simple reason that I want to be together, especially living here in Israel. I want to be together with the rest of the nation of Israel. I don't want to be lighting the third candle when they're lighting the first. I just want to be together. And since it's not a holiday that's that's enjoined by the Torah, that's commanded by the Torah, so I find that a little bit of flexibility there is not much of a big deal. So that's the way I deal with it. If you want to be a purist, then I would say do it according to the biblical calendar. Don't light the menorah. Don't say any of the blessings, and just have 8 days of joy and celebration. Okay, I'm not a purist. I'm a human being. What can I say? I have my nostalgia. I live here in Israel. I'm part of the Jewish people. So I find that when it's a non-biblical holiday, I can, for those reasons, make a little bit of a compromise. And that's the way I deal with it. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. Let's get back to any questions or comments you want to add, Yehuda?
No. That's most of it covered.
Let's talk about why it's 8 days. Okay.
Oh, yes, that's what I asked for. Yeah.
Dedication of the altar for 8 days. So for that, we're going to go to three different places, actually. 2 different places. Number one is going to be, and I'll just stick with English this time because we've already been at it for, oh my God, for just about 3 hours, over 3 hours actually. And we should probably end soon. Just give me 1 second here, please. And but let's raise this very briefly. So if we go to the book of Exodus, the end of the book of Exodus, specifically where we have the dedication of the tabernacle. So let's see if I can find it. It was at the beginning of the book of Leviticus. 1 second here. Setting up the tabernacle. Set up on the first day. Ark. 1 second here. And then Moses, the glory of the Lord. Okay, right. So no, I'm sorry. It's in Leviticus with the dedication of the priests. The offering. So that's going to be in Leviticus 7. If I remember correctly. No. 1 second here. The ordination of Aaron and his sons. Second here. One second. Where is it? Second utensils. Presented the bull. They presented the ram. Fat. Fat. No, it's not here. Let's go 1 chapter ahead. 9. The priests begin their ministry. Here, on the 8th day. There we go. So on the 8th day, Moses summoned Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. Right? So the dedication of the priests, this is Leviticus chapter 9, basically took 8 days, right? Inclusive, including the days when Aaron is actually called, right? So let me just go back 1 second here. Leviticus 8. Second. Kidneys and fat. You present the ram. 1 second here. Fat for the Lord is a wave offering. The most hands and burn. Anointing oil. 1 second. It's the most needed. If I can't find it now, we'll just do it another time. Here we go. This is the verse I was looking for. Okay. Do not leave the entrance to the tent of meeting for 7 days until the days of your ordination are completed, for your ordination will last 7 days. So 7 days they remain inside the temple, right? Basically purifying themselves and ready for the final ceremony or for the actual ordination. And then we have on the 8th day, right here. So on the 8th day, Moses summoned Aaron and his sons. This is again Leviticus chapter 9, verse 1. He said to Aaron, take a bull calf for your sin offering and a ram. And then they go through a whole ceremony, right? They took the things Moses commanded, etc. I'm just going to skip through because we've been going for a long time. Come to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering. Okay, so this is basically the ordination of the priests. So it takes 8 days, right? 7-day waiting period, and then on the 8th day, this is when the priests are actually ordained. They're actually inducted into office. So the whole process is an 8-day process. Okay, that's the first place that we get it from. Now, if we go to, you there, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Then if we go to, let's find it here. So dedication of the first temple is going to be First Kings. And it's going to be around maybe 10.
18?
Maybe. You say 18?
I think so.
Okay. Let's see.
Hang on, I can use ChatGPT 1 second. There we are.
No, this is afterwards. It's gonna be before this. It's probably more like 10.
Finds me. From
It's gonna be before this.
First Kings. Is it Kings, Melech?
And then First Kings. Here, it's around here.
First Kings.
9.
And then this one first.
Solomon's other
Kings.
activities. It's before this.
8 days.
The ark brought to the temple. So here we go. It's going to be First Kings 8.
Seven-day celebration.
Beautiful. I wish I could read the whole thing, but we don't have time.
Hang on. Yes. However, there may be inferred reference in the context of Solomon's dedication of the temple, which included a seventh-day celebration followed by an additional days. Yeah,
Right.
which
And
is.
we're going to find it right here. Here we go. No part of the courtyard.
Yes,
Solomon-
it's Solomon.
Yeah. Where is it? It's
What's
going to be in this chapter.
Yeah, it is. It's First Kings 8.
Yeah. So let's see where it mentions 7 or 8. Just do a search on the word 7 here.
It's chapter 8, so it's First Kings 8 from 65.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. So Solomon observed, and let's read this. Solomon observed. I wish we could read the whole chapter because it's very beautiful, but
Yeah, all right.
right. So Solomon observed the festival at the time, and all Israel with him, a vast assembly, people from Lebo Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt. At the time, they celebrated before the Lord our God for 7 days, and 7 days more, 14 days in all. On the following day, he sent the people away. They blessed the king, and then went home joyful and glad in heart for all the good things that Yahweh had done for his servant David and his people Israel. So there's the first 7 days, okay? But then there's 7 days more, okay? 14 days, but then there's a following day, right? Is when he sent the people away. So really the second 7 plus that final day, which is the 8th day, is really where we get the other 8 days. So it's kind of that second period is an 8-day period, okay? Yeah, true, 14 in all, or maybe 15 in all, but the second period is an 8-day period, okay? And there are other places mentioned as well, but those are the 2 ones. But the basic idea, or where does this 8 days come from? It really comes from Leviticus chapter 8 and 9, where the Levites in their induction have to go through it's an 8-day induction ceremony, basically. Okay, so that's where we're getting it from. So if the original temple is dedicated in 8 days, okay, including this last 7 plus 1 more, and that's coming from, and Solomon is getting that from the induction of the Levites when the original tabernacle was essentially dedicated, or when the service was installed. Because until the priests are installed, then the service of the temple can't take place because we need the priests. Then that's where Solomon is getting it from, and that is clearly where Yehuda Maccabee is getting it from here. Okay, there's one more source which is mentioned in Second Maccabees, and that is, maybe we could find it right now. I'll just mention it, and then if we do another study this week, which hopefully we will, we can go into more detail. That the Maccabees say they were fighting that year during Sukkot, right? We saw they were fighting the armies of Lysias, and so they could not celebrate Sukkot. Sukkot plus Shmini Atzeret lasts 8 days, so this was kind of a makeup for the fact that they couldn't celebrate Sukkot, and that's mentioned in the Second Book of Maccabees. So for all of those reasons, the inauguration, the Hannukah of the rededication of the Second Temple lasted for 8 days, and that's where we get the 8 days of Hanukkah from.
All right.
Okay.
So they celebrated the dedication of the altar for 8 days and joyfully offered burnt offerings. They offered
So they sacrificed on their newly rededicated altar.
Yes, they offered a sacrifice of well-being and a thanksgiving offering. They decorated the front of the temple with golden crowns and small shields. They restored the gates and the chambers of the priests for the priests and fitted them with doors. There was very great joy among the people, and the disgrace brought by the nations was removed.
Mhm.
Then Judas and his brothers and all the do you mind clicking off, Melech?
Absolutely. 1 second.
Thank you. That's great, thank you. Then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined that every year at that season, the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days,
Sorry.
beginning with the 25th day of the month
Of Kislev.
of Kislev.
Okay, and that's it. These really are the two important paragraphs in the First Book of Maccabees, as is related to the Hanukkah, to the holiday of Hanukkah. We can compare it very quickly to Esther chapter 9, and again, I'll just stick to the English to make it flow quickly, rather than translating from the Hebrew. But in Esther chapter 9, we see the establishment of the holiday of Purim, and you see it's very similar. It's more detailed, but it's very similar. Okay, so let me go down to it. Okay. So Purim established. We just read through this very quickly. So if you want to go ahead and just read through it very quickly, this is Esther chapter 9, verse 20.
All right. Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar, as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned into joy, and their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy, and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor.
Stop. So let's compare that now with these verses here. Let me cut out this one for a second. Let's compare that with these verses here. And read that again, please.
Which one? All right. Then Judas and his brothers and all the assembly of Israel determined that every year at that season, the days of dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness for 8 days, beginning with the 25th day of the month of Kislev.
Right. So it's very similar. It goes into more detail with in the book of Esther. It speaks about a second letter called the letter of Esther, and so on and so forth. But it's the same idea, right? That we have in this case Mordecai and then also Esther, but Mordecai enjoining basically and making all of the people enjoining all of the people to keep the commemoration of these events from year to year and do it as days of feasting and joy. Okay, here it adds giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor, which you can assume maybe that's what we're supposed to do on Hanukkah. And here should these days, that the days of the dedication of the altar should be observed with joy and gladness. It's almost the same words. Again, we're looking at the English, but it doesn't matter. It's the same idea, right? So that's Hanukkah is established by Judah HaMaccabee, Yehuda Maccabee, just as Purim is established by Mordecai and Esther. Okay, so it's really the same idea. So just as we Karaites should keep Purim, I think we Karaites should keep Hanukkah. The difference, I guess one could say, as a Karaite, is that Hanukkah is not in the Tanakh, whereas Purim is in the Tanakh. But I don't really think it makes. I mean, it makes a difference. So I treat Hanukkah a little bit less seriously than I treat Purim, just as I treat Purim a little bit less seriously than I treat the biblical holidays of Hakham Melech, etc. But nonetheless, I don't see any reason for us as Karaites not to celebrate this incredibly important event in the history of the people, especially since the Maccabees and the Hasmoneans, the early Hasmoneans at least, were aligned with the temple. They were Kohanim. They eventually became Sadducees, and they were not Pharisaic. They were not Pharisaically aligned. So for all of those reasons, I think we should, as Karaites, celebrate Hanukkah, and that's certainly what I do. How you choose to celebrate it, I guess, is up to you. I explained how I do it, and I explained the reasons that I do it. But at the very least, I think it should be celebrated. If you want to do it on the biblical calendar, starting on the 25th of the 9th month, go right ahead. If you want to do it on the rabbinical calendar, go right ahead. If you want to light a Hanukkah menorah without the blessings, go right ahead. You want to sing Hanukkah songs and do dreidel and all this kind of stuff. Dreidel came out of the Middle Ages, by the way. It's a Yiddish word, right? And I say, go ahead, enjoy. Just don't, in any way, shape, or form, make it sound like it's a holiday that is commanded by God, because it's not. Just as Purim is not a holiday commanded by God. So those are my thoughts. Yehuda, any final thoughts? And I think we'll sum up here.
No. I think that's everything.
So what's left in Maccabees? So we got to the end of Maccabees 4, and then it goes on into a lot more detail. Really, we got to the main part with regards to the Hanukkah story, but then it goes on to speak about what happens afterwards, and it really goes into great, almost excruciating detail. If we have time, maybe we can get into it later in the week, but I really feel like we've covered what we needed to cover to answer the relevant questions about Hanukkah as it relates to Karaites. So
yeah.
If you don't have any final words, then I guess we'll sum it up here. Any final parting words for the folks?
No, I hope for those who are observing Hanukkah, I wish you a Hanukkah Sameach, and I wish you a lovely day. That's it.
Very nicely said. We'll go out with some Hanukkah melodies, because why not? Hold on a second.
Sure. I wonder if Shlomo Karlbach, I wonder if he has any Hanukkah stuff.
I don't know, but I'm just gonna go. It's hard to find. It's actually kind of hard to find Hanukkah melodies online, so I'll just go with the ones that I was doing before. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. And that's it. I thank you all for joining us, for joining myself and Daniel. This has been Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. With Daniel, what is your last name that you're going by?
I go by my Hebrew name, Yehuda Ben David.
I'm sorry, I just called you Daniel. Yehuda Ben David. So Yehuda Ben David, an upcoming. Look for this guy. I'm telling you guys, watch out. This guy's up and coming, man. He's dangerous, dude. So watch out for Yehuda Ben David. So this has been Hakham Melech Ben Yaakov with Yehuda Ben David, who really, you've added so much to the study, not only just reading, but your ideas, your thoughts, your insights. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And wish everybody a happy Hanukkah. And we will see you again in Be'ezarat Yahweh for the Torah studies, which hopefully I will resume on a regular basis. As I said, I've just had to deal with some of my own things, but no big deal. We'll get back to that. Okay, so thank you guys, and see you all soon.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Hanukkah Sameach.
ימי החנוכה, חנוכת מקדשנו, בגיל ובשמחה ממלאים את ליבנו, לילה ויום סביב עוננו יסוף, סוף גניות נאכל בם לרוב. הדליקו, נרות חנוכה רבים, על הניסים ועל הנפלאות אשר עשה השם למכבים. על הניסים ועל הנפלאות אשר עשה השם למכבים. הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, הנרות הללו שאנו מדליקים, על הניסים ועל הנפלאות ועל התשועות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו, שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בימים ההם בזמן הזה. הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשורות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשורות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשורות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. על הניסים ועל הפורקן ועל הגבורות ועל התשורות ועל הנחמות שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. יוונים נקבצו עליי, אזי בימי חשמנים, ופרצו חומות מגדלי, ודימו כל השמנים, ומינות ארכנקנים, נעשה נס לשושנים, בני בינה ימי שמונה, קבו שיעור עננים, בני בינה ימי שמונה, קבו שיעור עננים. יוונים נקבצו עליי, אזי בימי חשמנים, ופרצו חומות מגדלי, ודימו כל השמנים. יוונים נקבצו עליי, אזי בימי חשמנים, ופרצו חומות מגדלי, ודימו כל השמנים. ומינות ארכנקנים, נעשה נס לשושנים, בני בינה ימי שמונה, קבו שיעור עננים, בני בינה ימי שמונה, קבו שיעור עננים. קטן, קטן, 8 ימים שם נולדן, כל העם מתפלא, מאליו ומתמלא, כל העם אז התכנס, והכריז אך זהו נס, אילו לקצה נשאר, מקדשנו לא רוח. קטן, 8 ימים שם נולדן,